Again, I'll welcome you to the Mesa City Council study session for March 26, 2026. Council members are ready and go forth are participating by Zoom. Otherwise, all council members are present. Item 1A is a presentation on the proposed programs to support redevelopment priorities and initiatives. With that, we'll move over to the next team. Jeff McVeigh, Jeff Robbins, Angelica, and Jay O'Donnell, and Nana. All right. Thank you all.
Morning, Mayor, Council.
Good morning.
As you noted, we've brought the lineup of subjects today to present to you the redevelopment toolkit. With me, I have Jeff Robbins, Angelica Guevara, Jay O'Donnell, and Nana Paya. We have been working hard since last January when we presented to the full council, and I'd also like to just take a moment to acknowledge the hard work of the teams that are behind us from Development Service, Economic Development, and Urban Transformation, particularly, Madison Cox, Amanda Elliott, and Rachel Phillips have been very instrumental in developing these toolkits. When we last presented to the full City Council in January, we came to you with the framework for a set of tools that would make up the redevelopment program. Since January, we went back to our offices, and we've been working hard to get the toolkits to the state that it is today. We're at about what we would call an 80% design state, which means that the toolkits are pretty well built out, but with Council's final direction, we'll take it to the next step and be able to finish off that development of the tools, including things like application materials and specific program guidelines. Before, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm sorry. Since we last presented, we have refined it down to now we have 8 tools, and we're going to go into and describe each of these tools to you, provide a summary of what they are intended to accomplish, the budget around it, as well as some administration and overall budget for a program. But before we get into the toolkit, Jay is first going to share an overview of our stakeholder engagement and what we learned from our focus groups as we presented these tools to them.
Thank you, Jeff. Good morning, Mayor and Council. When we initially presented this, Council asked us to actually go to the market to get feedback to make sure that we were on the right track. And so we did hold focus groups with private companies, small businesses, developers, and property owners. And the feedback was actually very positive, very receptive to these programs. One of the things that they stressed was if we do anything, we need to have a strong marketing plan and a marketing effort to talk about the programs and make sure that we're doing the right kind of outreach. They also wanted reasonable reporting requirements, so trying to minimize the red tape, and a simple application process, one that was fairly turnkey, that was easy to understand with fast approval or denial. And then they also provided strong support and feedback for the infrastructure tool with published timelines and very clear timelines so that they could understand how this would work from start to finish. So we felt confident that we were on the right track and that the programs that we're presenting to you today would be well received by the market, but also utilized by the developers, the property owners, and the small businesses who we're trying to attract for these redevelopment areas. So the first program that we're presenting today is the demolition and remediation program. The point of this program is to really improve neighborhood confidence and market perception for a particular parcel or neighborhood. This would be exactly as it sounds, really removing those obsolete buildings and structures, particularly those that are unsafe. And the goal is to really reduce blight and to prepare the site for reinvestment. And the mechanics, how this would work is we would really target those areas in redevelopment areas that would be determined to be hazardous or functionally obsolete. The maximum award that a property owner could could receive is $75,000 for the demolition, but that would be a one-to-one match. So the property owner would actually expend the money first, and then they would be reimbursed. So it's a reimbursable grant. 3 bids would be required to qualify for this funding. And then we would also be exploring some additional options with the Department of Environmental Quality. While we might not be able to get funding for demolition, there would be potential for remediation support with environmental analyses or phase 1 environmental studies.
Jay, Mayor. Yeah. Jay, I'm just curious. This is a broad question, so I'll try to paint it correctly. But assuming no environmental remediation is needed, what's kind of a range for a demolition project, say for an old gas station that doesn't need remediation, smaller building, or a drive-through building that's obsolete versus, say, a small strip mall that they want to clear out? Do we know?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, I think that every project is different. It's hard to say. For this particular project, we were estimating smaller sites. I haven't worked on any of the smaller projects. Maybe you could speak more to it, and have you done a recent development project, Jeff?
Jeff, have you knocked over a building, and how much did it cost?
Intentionally.
Is that why you have a nice new truck?
We've knocked over some structures, but not necessarily buildings. Demolition costs, Mayor, Vice Mayor, I guess the short answer is I don't have the actual number, how much it costs. We can talk to some of our developing partners and get some ideas from a cost per square foot, what they usually bake into a project for demolition. But I think it's important to know it can be a significant component of redevelopment cost. Demolition
I'm
can be
interested in that with the funding here, whether this is really going to be that impactful, and I think this program is important. So in future discussions, we might want to look at what those costs are and see if this is a properly funded tool, or if we need to go seek some more.
Great point.
I'm going to piggyback. You actually asked the question that was on my mind. I was holding it. To kind of train off of that, how'd you come up with 75,000? Like, where did that number come from if we don't know how much demolition necessarily costs?
Mayor, council member, when we were looking at this program, we did understand that demolition can range wildly, and for a lot of projects, it's going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think our intent was that we aren't coming in and doing all the work as the public. We wanted to be able to assist and incentivize, but not to put the burden of the full demolition of a private site on the public. And so we were trying to balance that, those needs. And this is a number we can continue to look at and adjust, but that was part of the thinking of why we came up with 75. We did look at some general numbers for demolition that did give us some insights, but we will come back with you with those exact numbers and the sources for those numbers.
I think that would be helpful, because am I wrong in understanding that you kind of took your total amount that you were thinking it would cost for this program and you deducted, like, this is what we think an offset cost for just even this one part of the project would be? And I love this already. I mean, I'm a big redevelopment girl. But I'm thinking, if we're not sure what those numbers actually are, we don't have a specific range, then what other areas have we deducted and assumed cost from the total amount that we really don't have those specific ranges? So then the numbers become kind of become nebulous. Like, how much does it actually cost to do this?
And and Jim, please speak up here as well, but Mayor, Council, I think what you'll hear as a theme as we talk about all these programs right now, what staff's trying to do, at least in this initial first year, is a guesstimate of what we think. We're going to have to true up, and we'll get that feedback from the participants. If people are interested in the program and then they come and they say, well, you're not really moving the needle at 75,000. You needed it to be double that amount. But those are some of the feedback that we'll get as people express interest in trying to utilize these funds and partnering with the city on that. And I think it is going to be, especially the first few years, this is envisioned as a pilot program, but every year we're going to have to tweak and adjust and move based on what the results have been once they've actually started working with potential partners in this endeavor. So
Could we say that administratively, we can maybe preempt some of that by having more static numbers to work with? Like, we basically go out for bid on the phone. Hey, what would it cost your company to demo this much? How much would it cost to put in asphalt with this much square footage? Like, so we have some good ideas of redevelopment costs. That way, when you come back and you're like, here's some numbers that we actually got on the phone with contractors, and we got an idea of what their bidding process would look like for us.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and Mayor and Council, maybe I'll give some context and you understand why, maybe in the future we could do that, but there's other concerns that are sort of driving some of these numbers. Let me give you sort of some history on the concept of the redevelopment area. The RDAs were created in conjunction with the Central Business District to be able to use the GPLIT deals, right? And so that was why it was done. The RDA statutes themselves also have language, which Jeff brought last time, to empower the city to do some additional incentives. The language is ambiguous and is not well developed within the statute. But as we've seen over the last several decades, the ability to use government property lease excise tax deals have become more difficult because the state legislature has winnowed down that tool. And in keeping with sort of the tool metaphor, it's a very big tool, but it's become a very difficult tool to use. And so the original purpose of creating the RDA in the Central Business District was to be able to use that GPLIT tool, right? That tool has now become very difficult to use. And so now we're looking at other tools. The reason why it's become difficult in part is also because of the courts and how they've interpreted the gift clause. And so what we're trying to do also is balance the fact that we want a very expedited process where we don't have to do a very specific one-on-one sort of analysis that the courts might do on a gift clause analysis, where we can say, well, we have a match, the number's low, we're going to fund something. We feel that that's going to satisfy any court on the gift clause analysis. If it's a larger number, we could still, and Jeff will get to this, we can still do a development agreement. We could look at the tools. It's still a possibility, but we're probably going to need to invest that time, and it's not going to go through this expedited process. By keeping the numbers low, we feel like we can expedite the process and move it quickly. It doesn't eliminate the ability for some much larger project where the demolition is going to be much higher than this, but then we're going to have to probably employ multiple tools and also look at how to use them in a more systematic approach.
Very helpful. Thank you. Thanks so much. Appreciate
Quick question, if I may. You're going to explore with ADEQ a partnership. I would think that that's important, because if you look at demolishing something built in the 60s or earlier, you're at a minimum going to run into asbestos. So tell me a little bit more about that. Is that something they're open to? Is that an important piece of that? It would seem to me it is. Are they receptive?
Mayor, council member, we've had a very preliminary discussions, and I think most of our time has been spent working with our internal sustainability department on this. And we've looked at every angle on how to approach this. We explored whether or not the city goes, and typically we'd be going for remediation funds that are provided through brownfields grants or through the EDA. And so we discussed, does the city go after those? And after exploring those avenues, we found that there was disadvantages to the city doing that. A lot of strings. We'll get into more strings with federal money later, but we decided we're going to approach this the partnership with an organization that can carry those grants, and we can apply for them as needed, but we're not the administrator of those grants. And so that would take a lot of the administrative burden, a lot of the reporting, a lot of the compliance off of us and put it onto ADEQ. And so we have worked in the past with ADEQ to do this. We did it for Cider Corps. So we have experience, and now it's trying to now formalize that. And you are exactly right. Remediation was its own tool when we began this process, because every site, especially the redevelopment sites, have at least suspected contamination, and most developers will not touch those sites with a 10-foot pole until we're able to remove that specter of contamination.
Okay, it sounds like I'm satisfied you delved into that extensively, so thank you.
Okay. Ms. Duff?
I just wanted to pull away from getting those ranges of demolition. I think it's so vast, as far as materials, is it frame or thing, whether the axis is whatever. It's huge, huge amount of information. The range can be very small to very big on the same square footage, depending on a lot of factors that you couldn't anticipate. But the other point is, I appreciate the comment from Jim on, making sure it's not getting into the gift clause conflict. And also, I think our program, I'd like to really keep it to helping small businesses, getting that incentive to help them. 50,000 or 50% or 75,000 as a max, that'd be $150,000 for remediation or demolition. For a small business, that's significant. And if we had it, let's say it needs to be, to satisfy the range, maybe it needs to be 250,000. Our fund that we've set aside is going to deplete very quickly if we have large amounts. And it's also going to attract larger projects, maybe developers. And when you get into large developers, there's some other tools. Most of our RDA is an opportunity zone. There's investment. There's all kinds of incentives and tools for developers. But for the small guy, this is it. So I want to make sure that we reach as many businesses as possible within the funds that we can squeeze out of our budget and assist those small businesses, because that's where it's almost impossible to get financing sometimes for these projects. You aren't large enough to qualify for the incentives or even go through the paperwork for that. So I think keeping it manageable prices that we can spread the peanut butter a little thinner and reach more small businesses, I think is really strong for this program. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Where did we leave off? Jay was speaking, then I went to Jeff and Jeff. Angelica hasn't said anything yet. So
Just wait, Mayor.
Next slide.
are we back to Jeff, Jay and Donna?
Everybody else is ordering lunch.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. This next program that I'm going to...
And before you start, since I just want to finish up. When you talk about this demolition and remediation, who's handling, what department's handling this? Are you tag teaming it all together? Do we have, I want to know, do you have staffing to do this work? I mean, how's this plug and play?
Mayor, if you're okay holding it, we do have a section on administration and how we plan to administer this
figured I'd
towards the
ask
end,
that
and we
question,
can,
didn't
yeah,
you?
we can cover
wait.
it then.
No, we're all good. Thank you. Jay, or no, Angelica.
Thank you. This next program is the Code Compliance Revitalization Grant. The purpose of this program is to be able to work with property owners and small businesses to be able to help them provide a greater impact when they're trying to remove blight and beautify their property. Because we know that whenever we have code issues at a property, it will deter investment of surrounding properties. It reduces business activity, it has an impact on health and safety, and it just negatively contributes to areas with already struggling economic activity. So as part of this program, it's a one-to-one match with a maximum award of $25,000, but the purpose behind it is to be able to help small businesses and property owners provide improvements to their property that are visible from the street. The property owners, in order to qualify, can have an open code case or just any type of determination that there is blight on the property. So it doesn't require that they have existing violations on the property, but if they have some type of blight factor contributing at their property, they would qualify for this grant, provided that the property is located within a redevelopment area or that the property has the conditions of blight. This would also apply to legal nonconforming structures. We would exclude any non-fixed assets and improvements that are not visible from the street. Are there any questions?
That's it? That's all we get?
As part of this program,
Okay. I have a question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the maximum award is $25,000. That's a one-to-one match. So if somebody came in for 25, the total would be 50, I'm assuming.
that is correct.
Okay. What's the total budget allocation for this? How many of these awards do we have budget for? Is there an overall budget, and how much is it?
So Mayor, Councilmember Adams, if you don't mind, towards the end of the presentation, we do
part of
have a
it.
slide that specifically addresses.
Okay. I'm sure Mr. McVeigh has stayed up late trying to anticipate every question, so thank you. Okay, thanks. That's all I had.
Because blight is so bad in my area, I actually just thought of something. Is District 2 an RDA? Because I think you said it wasn't.
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, if you don't mind waiting until the end of the presentation.
Oh, no. I'm dreading this.
Can we start at the end?
Yeah, can I just maybe like invert this whole thing? I'm anticipating that part of this.
Okay, well, we're going to wait, so.
So
Next.
Mayor, council members, we'll move on to the next program. So the next program is the vacancy registration. This program would require property owners to register their properties that are vacant with the city. As part of that registration process, they would be opting into the police department's no trespassing program. In addition to that, they would be required to provide the city a local contact, so name, address, phone number, a way for the city to be able to contact somebody if there is an issue on the property. As part of the registration for vacant property, a code compliance officer would visit the site, inspect the property for any violations that exist so that we can share that information with the property owner. There are a lot of property owners that are not local, so that is valuable information that we can provide them. We would be in communication with them to inform them of any violations on their property so that they can address them. The purpose of this program is really to help us have a method to connect property owners with resources. The information that will be gathered as part of this vacancy registration program is really going to help code compliance. Whenever we identify an issue, when we have a property owner that is not local, we mail them a letter, and that is time consuming. Having a registry with local contact will allow us to pick up the phone, call somebody, inform them of any issues. This information will also be available to the police department, and it will also be available and used by staff in economic development, in urban transformation office, and be able to connect any potential businesses with these property owners to help them provide them resources and provide connections with potential tenants. So the idea is to help those vacant buildings get occupied a lot sooner. In addition to that, it would save a lot of staff time from the police department and from code compliance and having to track down the owner and local contact information. So we are excited about this program and are really looking forward to it. As part of the program, registration initially would be free. There would be no fee to register as part of the program, and registration would be required within 90 days of a building going vacant. As our code officers identify properties that are vacant and are not registered, we will reach out to property owners to provide them the information so that they can register, and same thing, the registration initially is free. We are anticipating fees for registration annual renewals that would increase as the years go on if a building remains vacant. And the reason for that is because as a building remains vacant longer, it requires additional staff resources in having to perform inspections and calls for service to the police department, because we know that vacant buildings attract trespassing, fires, vandalism, illegal dumping, and then just buildings start to deteriorate and become unsafe, which does require a lot more staff resources and attention to it. So we're excited for this program. As property owners do renew, they would continue to have annual inspections by a code compliance officer. If the building has no evidence of any violations, we are considering having either reduction in the renewal fee, so no fee, or a 50% reduction in the fee. That's one of the points that we're still finalizing with any of your guidance.
Is there a consequence if they don't register? So this is an optional, opt-in situation?
The registration would be a requirement of all property owners after a building is vacant
For 90 days?
For 90
So this
days.
would be a city ordinance?
Yes.
Is what you're asking for?
Yes.
Okay. My other question, hold on.
If I can finish.
Oh, yeah, go for it, sorry.
Addressing that as well. The idea behind it is that property owners register voluntarily, but if they do not, and we identify a building that is vacant, we will reach out to the property owner, just like we do with a violation on a property, to inform them and educate them that we have this ordinance, we have this requirement, and invite them and give them the resources and information for them to register. If they do not register, we will follow up with them, as we do similarly to a code case, to inform them again, hey, you need to register. At a certain point, if they fail to register, we can start enforcement process as we do with a code violation, because it would be considered a code violation. But our focus is really to approach them with education and information to get them to voluntarily comply.
Okay. I remembered my second question. So when you started talking about this portion of it, you mentioned if I was a property owner and I registered my property, along with that would come the trespass enforcement.
Yes.
Through the Mesa PD. Forgive me, but does the Mesa PD not have permission to enter a property if it's privately owned, but it's vacant, to check to see that somebody has trespassed or hasn't trespassed? Is there some sort of...
So, Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, it's my understanding that Mesa PD can enter a property if there is a crime being committed, or to do a welfare check of a building or a person.
Okay.
But in order to trespass a person, they do have to have authorization from the property owner. So including that as part of this vacancy registration will help speed up that process for them.
Got it. Okay, and just for the public to hear, this is being proposed because we have so many properties in Mesa that are owned by individuals who have decided to let them become derelict and have neglected them. And so the surrounding areas, neighborhoods, shopping centers, you name it, have become very concerned about the level of safety and the value of their properties going down as a result of other people's negligence.
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, this program is proposed specifically to address those issues, because we do know, we've looked at our data, we know 7.7% of our commercial buildings are currently vacant.
Say that one more time, how many?
7.7%.
0.7%. So
Right.
we're getting closer to the 10% of Mesa. Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Question, if I may.
Yes.
Actually, a couple. I'll ask them and then let you respond to them all at once, if that's more convenient. Do other municipalities in the greater Phoenix area have a similar vacancy registration? In other words, what did you model this after? That's part one. The second is, okay, you say fines for non-registration will match commercial civil violation fines. Describe for me what commercial civil violation fines might entail. And I may have another question after you answer.
That's okay. Mayor, Councilmember Adams, we have staff that have done a lot of extensive research throughout the state for programs similar to this. We have specifically modeled this program after the existing program that the City of Phoenix has. City of Phoenix has a robust program that they've had in place for several years. So we were very happy to gather that information, as well as add into this program specific key points from other programs from other jurisdictions that we thought would be complementary to our use.
So Phoenix is it, or other communities as well?
There are additional ones.
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember, they are smaller, Tombstone and Huachuca City.
And Mayor, Council, I think to that point, Councilmember Adams, this is really common nationally, and I think it's maybe a reflection of the newness of Arizona cities relative to cities maybe on the East Coast. But but the further east you go, you start seeing a lot more of these vacancy registries. So it is a common tool in other states and municipalities. So.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council Member, if I may jump in on that as well, this was not codified until only a few years ago. So Phoenix began their program, I want to say around 2022, and they started right after the law was established by the state legislature. So it is truly very new to Arizona, and we expect other cities will come on, but we're at the forefront of that process.
Okay.
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, to continue answering your question about the fees for annual registration, the City of Phoenix currently charges $250 for the first year, $500 for the second year, and then it escalates to $1,000. We actually started modeling our fee structure with Phoenix's fees, but heard commentary from the subcommittee regarding the thoughts that the fees were a little high. So we have come back and are looking at, like I said, initially, no fee for initial registration, but then after that, it would be $150 for the first year, $250 for the second year, $500 for the third year, $750 for the fourth year, and then the fifth year would be $1,000. And the reasoning behind that is just because the longer a building sits vacant, the more staff time and staff resources across the police department, code compliance, economic development, urban transformation, development services, that staff time is spent on trying to help property owners find tenants for their buildings, or just answer questions, or address any issues that come up at those specific properties. As far as the proposed fines, the current fines that we have for civil citations are $250 for the first fine, $350 for the second, and $500 for the third. Council does have a proposal that they will be considering in the next couple of weeks, where we are proposing higher fines for commercial properties. And so,
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
okay, thank you.
Just a couple follow-ups. Does the city still own the northeast corner of Stapley and Main, the old Mervyn store?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, yes, the city does.
Okay, that'll be the example of my question. Would city-owned properties also be subject to what we're talking about here?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, yes, they would be.
Fines included?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, we typically contact our real estate office if we do see a violation or are informed of a violation on city property, and we typically do not have to get to the point where we are issuing ourselves fines, because the city is typically good stewards of our property and do provide maintenance. We have a great example.
I would think so, yes.
Here, why don't I answer this as city manager?
Sure.
If we
Okay.
get to the point where we're not upkeeping our property, we should be fined, and we should pay that fine. And we just
Okay.
like any other property owner in the city, that, you know, we
Okay, I'm-
should be held to that same standard. So,
I'm looking for
yeah.
fairness here.
Yeah.
I'm looking for fairness of enforcement. I'll be honest with you, I find this a little bit Big Brother-ish, and maybe conflicting with some of my standards and tenets in private property rights, but I'm willing to continue to learn more about the basis of this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Adams.
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you. I have to say, I'm a little bit with Councilmember Adams on this. I understand the issue that we're trying to solve here with helping these vacant properties. But I guess I'm trying to understand what the fine is actually going to do. Are you trying to incentivize them to rent lease? Or why would, they can't, why are they going to be motivated to pay $250 when they're missing out on thousands and thousands of dollars of lease? I need a little bit more time to sort of understand what we're trying to do here. And I'm kind of with Councilmember Adams on, they can't lease the property and we're going to fine them for that.
Mayor, Councilmember, one thing, and as we come back, this is obviously, as has been alluded to, that this would require code change and something that Councilmember Adams, we can continue a dialogue on. There's a discussion that we've had about rewarding property owners that upkeep their property by not having to pay that annual assessment. So if you have a vacant property that's registered, but you have no code violations during that time, you would not be subject to needing to pay that fee. So if you have a vacant property, if you maintain that property and it's not causing hardship on the community or city resources, the police department, anything like that, no violations, then you don't need to pay that fee. And that's a concept that we're looking at as well, and can further explore that and bring that back to you as we discuss that further. So.
Yeah, that seems to make sense to me. I would like to hear a little bit more about that. My other question is on the percentage. So you gave us this percent. I have no context for that. Well, is 7% high? Is it low? What is the valley-wide level? I mean, I'm not quite sure. Is 7% vacancy rate, is that a problem?
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, I'll try to frame this. It's not necessarily, we didn't come to this tool because Mesa is having rampant vacancy. I think why we came to this tool is because we do have bad actors in the city. They are typically property owners. They're part of very large funds, of real estate funds owned out of state. And it is an equity issue when we have a property that is not being taken care of, where code enforcement is spending hours and hours of time, which is funded by taxpayer dollars, to try to find where these people are, get them to take care of their property. There are issues that are spreading to nearby neighbors who are trying their best to run their businesses and be good small business owners. And so it's about the bad actors. And we have plenty of great actors who are trying to fill their buildings. And we understand that. We are not trying to punish them in any way. In fact, we're trying to help them by understanding what resources the city has to help them to fill their space. We want them to be active. We want them to be full. But in the case of the bad actors, this gives us a way of getting contact quickly, reducing staff time to try to track people down. And to answer the question, this is not about trying to punish or leverage your right. For a large REIT or other real estate organization, a few $100s is not going to matter. This is about trying to not shift the burden of the upkeep onto other taxpayers.
And Mayor
Thank you,
and
Jeff. And I agree with I understand all that and agree with it. I just am wondering if this is effective. When you looked at Phoenix, is it effective? Is it working?
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, we had an interview with the team that is running it for Phoenix. They have reported that they found this to be helpful, and they did also admit that this is rather new to their city. They're still getting people to register, and that's a process. For us, we would be sending out notices and letting people know, trying to inform business owners that property owners, that this is a new ordinance in the city, and they're having the same thing as they ramp up. So I would say, council member, to the best of my ability, that this is still a new tool, but the initial findings are promising, and Phoenix said that it is helpful.
Thank you. And I do appreciate that you all are looking for solutions here, that we're, that it is new and that we are trying to find solutions to some of these issues, and that it's not a broad stroke. I'm hoping, that we really are able to come up with a solution that targets those actors that are neglecting their properties and causing all kinds of trouble for the city and their neighbors. So anyway, I have questions about it, but thank you though for, trying to come up with ways to solve and address these issues. So thanks.
Ms. Duff.
Just a quick comment. I'd really like the registration so that we have a contact information. I've been on ride-alongs, police and fire, and there's been an incident at the property. They couldn't get a hold of the property owner. One of them was on fire, and they sold guns there, and so they just needed to know what was inside. So when the firefighters entered, where was this, what they could encounter, things like that. And it burned and burned while they're trying to search for the owner. And he was out of town and whatever. So having a contact for public safety, also for our code compliance, because that's an issue overall, is getting a contact for a property and having them be aware and respond is very difficult. Also, without, many times we have encampments or crime going on in the property, and we can't get a hold, this has happened many times in my district, we can't get a hold of the property owner to let them know so they would register with the trespass enforcement so that we could have public, an officer push the people out. Without the trespass enforcement, we couldn't do that. So it allows that to build. So there are some really good advantages just having the information and the trespass enforcement. The registration and the trespass enforcement is really key to keeping the properties safe for everybody.
Just one real quick follow-up. I don't want to belabor this because I know that I appreciate what Mr. Butler said. This is a work in progress. One of the biggest concerns I have is that, you mentioned a real estate investment trust, big outfit out of somewhere on Wall Street, right? Versus the small commercial property owner who's a local guy, maybe having trouble getting his building leased or whatever. My concern is that our enforcement and our fining process is fair and equitable and doesn't simply go after low-hanging fruit. It's real easy to go after someone local who has a struggling commercial building and fine them and lien them and go through all this process. It's easier than to go after the REIT that has a few $1 billion in net worth and has a bevy of attorneys ready to deal with us. My concerns here have to do with fair and equal enforcement, and I'm going to need to be convinced that we're doing that.
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, I'm going to use that response to that statement as an opportunity to transition to the next slide. Because, and I'm going to be the third or fourth person to say it, our intent behind vacancy registration is not punitive. Really, the opportunity, not only for the opportunity for code and police and fire to have a contact, it's really for, Jay and my teams to have contacts so that we can go out to those property owners and say, we see that you're vacant. What is the problem? What's stopping you from being able to lease that building? Let's go to the next slide, please. Reuse ready is an answer, right? There is oftentimes long-term vacancy. There's a reason why there's long-term vacancy. There could be an issue with the building. There could be something from a current code perspective, life safety, accessibility, that those renovations are so cost prohibitive that it makes it challenging for a small business to take over a space and lease up a building. The vacancy registration gives us contact information and essentially an entree to those property owners, to future small businesses, to be able to go and say, hey, do you know we have this new redevelopment program and these tools that are available to you and your businesses that you want to lease to help address those conditions that might be making you vacant long term. So the Reuse Ready program is a reimbursable grant program that we can use with property owners as they lease their buildings to small businesses to provide essentially some offsetting grants to address those very costly issues that may be why the building's vacant. The addition of fire sprinklers to allow adaptive reuse of a building from what it is today to a more active use like a restaurant can be extremely expensive today. If you have to change out a restroom to get 36 inches of room to have ADA accessibility, that can be extremely expensive, and it can prohibit those buildings from being reused. So I believe all of us sitting here want to use a vacancy registration as the way that we get to the next stage of being able to offer tools and assistance to help fill those buildings so that this isn't an issue down the road.
Mayor, I have another question.
Go ahead.
Jeff, can you give us a sense? I mean, you've always obviously have looked at the vacant properties in the city. Can you give us a sense about the owners? I mean, are we looking at these tools because we have a lot of small business owners that need help? Are the majority of these property owners?
Mayor,
do you know?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, it is a mixed bag, and as Councilmember Adams described, the small local property owners, they have some good real estate, might be in a good location, but the cost to them, when we first presented the redevelopment program, we talked about the three different stakeholders, the small businesses, the property owners, and the developers. Each of those have a stake in this, and the local property owners, it is cost prohibitive to them as well. Oftentimes, times when you have a large, say you have a REIT and they're doing leasing, they have a significantly greater source of capital available to do tenant improvements on behalf of the tenant and then just charge them lease rates that are commensurate with the improvements they put in. Smaller local property owners don't often have that source of funding, so they often require their small businesses to be the ones that take on those improvement costs. And they may get a lower rent rate because of that, but those improvement costs become a bar that are difficult to get over in order to get them in the building in the first place. Councilmember Goforth, I'm not sure if I answered your question or not.
No. Thank you for trying. I was really just wondering, of the 7%, what are we talking about here? This is it seems like a great program, but are the majority of our problem areas actually owned by local, are they local property owners, or the majority are REITs, and this is really not gonna, these programs aren't really going to affect or help many of these vacant and blighted areas. And I can talk to you further, maybe offline, if that is getting us off track.
Sure, Mayor and Councilmember Goforth, and we will look into that. We do not currently have the ability to give you an answer as to what the proportion is between local and out-of-state REITs that are ownership, but I can tell you that just from anecdotal and just personal experience, it is often those locations that have the greatest challenges, those that are often the most I guess have the most conditions of slum and blight. Those are often the local property owners because they are they're the one-off buildings, the small retail center or the individual standalone building. So we will continue to dig in and try and get you some answers to that, how that's split. But it is our belief that there is a significant amount of local folks that this can benefit.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Jeff, I'm sure that Angelica's team's out there and they're probably boots on the ground. They probably know that answer to that. They can probably do a snapshot for you and for us. So you don't have to answer, but I think that they're very cognizant of who is property owners here and abroad or outside the state. Okay, who's next?
I'll keep going, Mayor.
Thank you.
All right. The next tool that we're just to describe is the strategic acquisition and analysis. This tool recognizes there are locations across the city that the right redevelopment or reuse of a building can have a catalytic effect on redevelopment, the broader redevelopment goals in the area. Well, strategically located, these sites are often blighted, bypassed, or located in an area that isn't proven to the market, where people are not willing to invest today, be first to market. Occasionally, the strategic nature of these sites warrants that the city ownership is necessary to be able to ensure that redevelopment matches and aligns with the city's goals and visions. Occasionally, in those instances, an acquisition would follow our normal process and would be considered individually by the council for acquisition. However, what this tool does provide us is with the ability to go out and conduct analyses and feasibility studies to determine the redevelopment viability for a location in partnership with property owners, and hopefully be able to create a framework in which we work with property owners to help them identify and understand the redevelopment potential of their site, to be able to market and reposition their property for redevelopment, as well as help understand the economic benefit, broader economic benefit to the city should they go through a redevelopment. There are a couple case studies that we are currently working on as an example, where conducting an economic benefit analysis of different redevelopment options on a property can help us understand what is the right way to proceed forward. Council's well aware that in the next month or so I'll be coming forward with the final purchase agreement for 1 West Main Street. That is a site that the council agrees was strategically located, and having control over the next stage and what happens there is very important. Now there's a next step after purchasing is what do we do next? And so we are conducting an economic analysis of what is the right thing, an adaptive reuse of the property as it exists today, or a broader redevelopment that would look at raising and rebuilding the site so that we can bring to council the options and they can consider from an economic benefits perspective what is the right path forward. The strategic acquisition analysis tool is intended to continue and allow us to do that on more properties across the city.
Mayor, Council, one of the things that the council continue to discuss is really how we can focus on enhancing our urban landscape, how we can really be strategic when it comes to placemaking. So one of the things that we're looking at is how the city can strategically, directly participate in this improvement to our urban landscape. So what we're looking at is we have a requirement. So the requirement is specifically for commercial properties when they are being developed or redeveloped, and how we identify the need through the requirement is, example, when we have CIP projects, we look at ways that we can incorporate things that strategically enhance the urban landscape, things that really improve our, landscape. And when we're talking about placemaking, what are the things that it all entails? So we're looking at those items and things. Example of things that we're looking at is, example, our gateway monumentation signs, which we did have the discussion with City Council about 4 or 5 months ago, which will be coming to council. We've identified those specific locations and how the signage are going to look, and the shape form and all the other things. We're also talking about wayfinding signs, wayfinding opportunities to really clearly identify the city itself. And then we're looking at things like the canal improvement, along our cities. So those are the specific things or tools that we are going to be using for us as a city to directly participate. But it's also important to really note that this is not isolated from the partnership with the private developers, because we do have so many private development coming in, and sometimes when council is talking about placemaking, we're talking about placement of buildings, orientation of buildings, landscaping, connectivity. That is still taking place. We have been very conscious about those when development comes in, how overall we can really improve our urban landscape. But this too is very specific to how the city can directly participate in improving the urban landscape.
Mayor, Council, the next tool is public infrastructure. This is one that our focus groups really latched on to and liked, because without having the public infrastructure to tap into, private development does not occur. Our small focus group, which is focused on small business owners, really latched on to this idea, and they told us it was incredibly important to them that there's a solution quickly. And this has been built by our own experience from our personal office in downtown, where we've seen lots of businesses who have tried to open. They've gone to tap into the electric, the water, wherever it may be, and there isn't capacity. And the challenge that brings is that even though our energy resources, water resources departments have been excellent partners always with us, there's time that takes to figure out who's paying for this, what does the agreement look like. And so having funds that we can rapidly deploy to make sure that our assets, the public assets, are at capacity and sufficient is going to help to make sure that small businesses can open quickly, start operating, benefiting the community, and generating tax benefits for the city. There is a second tier to this tool now, and that's above 50,000. And the reason we have that break there, you may be wondering, is because typically those small improvements are going to be under $50,000. But once we start getting over 50, we have to really start analyzing what is the true benefit to the public, and that's going to usually take a negotiation. So we are proposing the two different tiers: small, very fast deployment of funds, and then for our larger, being able to look at those, work those out, and put together a structured public benefit agreement and be able to still help those big, high impact needs that are dependent on public infrastructure. The next is the EDA revolving loan fund. Revolving loan funds, again, they exist to fix a funding gap in the institutional lending markets between $50,000 and $250,000. These are very common across the United States, and the EDA has launched over 500 of these programs with other cities around the country. We like this tool a lot, and at our last presentation back in January, the council asked us to bring a bit more information to really understand this tool, so there is a bit more content here, and I will walk through it as quickly as I can. The city's role in this type of arrangement would be to be the trustee of federal assets. And we would handle all of the administration, reporting, and we'd also have some local control about how the funds are deployed, what are the city's priorities, and we'd also have some control over how the money is lent, including the interest rate. We like this tool because of the amount of impact. It can be lent up to, seeded up to $2 million by the EDA. And I did mention at the beginning that we would be the trustee of these funds, but that interest by the federal government can be released after 7 years. In fact, that's what Flagstaff did, and now they have local control of their fund. So we like that. And we also did some research on a question we had at our last presentation about the city's responsibility if there is to be a default by a small business. The EDA understands that that's part of lending, and you can do the best underwriting possible, and it's still possible that a loan can default. And so if that was the case, the city's not responsible. The fund amount would simply go down, but the EDA would not be coming to the city and asking for us to replenish the fund in any way. I won't go over all of the strings. There's a lot of strings when you're dealing with federal money. There is two things that really do matter, though, from a redevelopment perspective, and that is environmental review and Davis-Bacon, which is the prevailing wages. That can slow down significantly construction projects, and that's something we want to be very aware of. But the two big obstacles that we want to discuss with you today that the city has to provide, or I shouldn't say the city, but somebody has to provide a 40% match to the EDA funds. And we have, in investigating this, found that the city cannot be the ones to do that with general funds. And so we've begun conversations with different CDFIs. Those are community development financial institutions that have a public purpose in economic development. Those early talks have been promising, but it would take some time. The other obstacle is that the region must have a plan, comprehensive plan for economic development. Maricopa County, unfortunately, is the only part of Arizona that does not have an EDA accepted plan. So we would have to work with the region or find another alternative compliance method, which again takes time. So our proposal, council, is that we'd like to keep EDA in mind. We'd like to work through these problems, and we can come back to council at a future date if we're able to work through those and have a discussion then to see if it still makes sense. In the meantime, the EDA is not the only way to fund a seed program, or to seed a revolving loan fund program. So we are wanting to explore talking to local banks, looking at grants, looking at foundations that maybe help us to get a program faster, maybe a little bit smaller, but also with less strings that we could deploy sooner for our small businesses.
Jeff, I'll ask a question. What other buckets of funding would be available besides what you discussed? Have you explored all of them? I mean, other federal dollars, other grants?
We did look at CDBG. CDBG can fund a revolving loan fund, but and we're not the experts on this, I want to be clear,
Sure.
Mayor, is that if EDA is complicated, CDBG is even more complicated. And so it is possible, it is done in other places, but it's one that we're not as keen on.
We'll come back with all the options.
Okay.
Quick question.
Yes.
I ventured into this questioning last year about this time, and I don't think I got answers that satisfied me, but when you come back, you mentioned that if EDA is complicated, CDBG is even more complicated. I'd like you to really drill down into that so that a simple guy like me can understand why. So when you come back, I'd like to have you cover all that.
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, we will come back with the Community Services Department. They are the experts. Thank you.
You have a chance to explore that a little more in the next presentation.
So Mayor, Council, we've now drilled down into the tools, and we're going to get to the part that we would like to lead with, which is how, from a very high-level perspective, is the program going to be administered? hearing our focus groups and really listening to what they were saying. Again, I'll repeat something that Jay said that was very on point, which is they said, we like this program, you're headed in the right direction, but please cut the red tape down to a minimum. And so we are envisioning that there would be support from the Office of Urban Transformation, although any of the core team can jump in and help different applicants go through the process. We'd have a single point where anybody could apply for these programs. They could apply for any that work for them. So we're not sending them to different places all over the city's website, just one portal. There would be an intake and review to make sure the applications are complete. And then we envision a decision process that is criteria-based so that we know immediately, are they in or are they out? That's what they asked for. We just need to know, are we going to qualify or not? And then we like that too from a staffing perspective, because that frees us up to really focus on the experience of these applicants after they are approved. We want to make sure that they are having a great experience, that they are able to get through the program quickly, get the funds they need. We know development can be complex, and if you're focused on running your business, you're not an expert in development, but that's why we exist. And so we want to be able to make sure that we have time for that. Redevelopment area plan, Councilmember Taylor, getting to your question earlier. Right now, you may have noticed a lot of these tools are designed to work within a redevelopment area. And if we look at the total coverage of the current 4 redevelopment area plans, they cover 4.5% of the city. I think we all know that there are probably other properties around the city that could benefit from being within an RDA and could benefit from these tools. And so one of the very first tasks that we would like to begin is the creation of a 5th redevelopment area plan. This would in no way modify the existing RDAs. They're going to stay in place. They're going to keep their plans working. This would be a new plan that would cover new territory. We would envision this extending out east. I do envision a large portion of District 2 would be involved in this, but this could go out. We've talked about properties on Power Road that could benefit. And so we need to do a full analysis to see where this would land. There is state statute requirements that exist that we'd have to comply with to make sure that we're meeting all of those. But we would like to begin that process so that we can deploy these tools to a larger area.
Marketing. As I mentioned earlier, Mayor and Council, marketing is going to be crucial to ensure we have participation in these programs, and we would employ a number of different tactics to engage the private sector to partner with us. Many of those we would rely on what we're doing already in the Office of Economic Development and Urban Transformation, but really to rely on our existing partners and our networks to promote the programs that you decide to adopt. We already have dedicated web pages to promote the redevelopment areas and our other areas of the city, but we would have a dedicated website that really explains the programs that you would adopt and promote the opportunities within those areas, and obviously have the right contact information as well as an application process available online. We already do this with the Small Business Assistance Program. It's an application process that's very turnkey and easy to administer, so we would envision something very similar to that. And it would offer a very quick and easy way to determine if those property owners and small businesses could qualify. So again, just reaching out to our existing networks and also forming new relationships with architects and engineers and other developers who we might not have engaged with over the years because these are new and different programs.
Okay, Mayor, to start answering the questions at the early stages, we're there. To fund the redevelopment toolkit that we presented, we are requesting establishing a 3-year pilot program with an annual budget, general fund budget of $3 million. The funding, as we see on the screen, the funding would be divided among the 7 redevelopment tools. But as shown, the flexibility needs to be, particularly in these early days, the flexibility needs to be built into the funding so that we can be responsive to funding those tools that are having the most impact and are being accepted by the market responses. But at the same time, providing expenditure caps so that we are able to ensure that funding is available for a full comprehensive program so that no single tool can eat up the entire redevelopment program funding. The impact of this funding, as to address one of the questions earlier, I think Councilmember Taylor, we are going to be continually analyzing the outcomes that we are achieving with the redevelopment program and these tools, so that we can adjust funding, that we can be able to move money within these buckets to be able to address and get and be able to respond to the market and what is having the most impact. We will be looking at things such as what is the dollar of private ROI, private CapEx as a proportion of public dollars that are being used to support redevelopment, so that we can be adjusting these budget figures. I mean, we can come back to you and be able to provide a reasonable amount of reporting, by yearly or annually, come back and give you reporting on the outcomes of these expenditures.
And Mayor, Council, going back to this concept of public benefit, we realize that in many cases, our goal here is going to be pretty swift in increasing tax revenue, especially for vacant properties that are activated. But in the cases, especially, for example, the larger infrastructure tier, that's one that's negotiated. And we want to make sure that no matter what we're doing, we are always ensuring that there is a clear public benefit when the city is participating in economic development. So we're proposing a menu style of different benefit options. If we're working with a small mom and pop shop, it may make sense that it's not complicated. We don't want to make it overcomplicated. And so volunteering with Mesa's citywide volunteer program may be a solution. If it is a larger development, that may be a deed restriction, or we see this a lot of times, enhanced improvements in the public right-of-way to beautify the environment. So we'll be looking at these carefully and plugging them in as they make sense to ensure that the public interest is always maintained. And impact. This is a high priority, council, that we've heard from you, and we've thought about this in 3 different ways. One, measuring the outcomes of the program to make sure we are achieving what we intend, measuring the efficiency of the program itself, how well are we administering it, and then looking at the long-term impacts, because it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to have an intervention and then for that property to immediately fail and not produce long-term results for the city. So when we look at the outcomes, we are looking at how much private capital are we leveraging. If the city's going to contribute, are we able to do a 3-to-1, 4-to-1? Are we bringing more investment that otherwise would not have occurred in the city? Are we creating more tax base for the city? Are we remediating the blight? Are we creating and retaining jobs? And when we're looking at our program, it's how many of these properties and businesses are we helping? As Jeff mentioned, we want to be monitoring which programs are being used the most, and if there's programs that aren't being used, why is that? Is there something there that's unattractive that we need to go back and fix? And then we are also going to be looking at, are we just getting the dollars out the door? And for our long term, Jeff mentioned that we will be doing a 3-year pilot program. At that time, we'd like to look back at some of the earliest projects that we've worked with, look to see how they are doing, have a full measurement of the impact they've had, and bring those back to council so that you can have an informed decision about the efficacy of this program.
Quick question, if I may.
Yeah.
Can you, on this slide, I assume that all of these bullet points and presumably more will be data points that you will be tracking and reporting back to council on whether or not you've, are you going to set goals here? In other words, we want to achieve X, Y, Z, and then we will see on some periodic basis, annual, I would assume, how well we're tracking with these data points.
Mayor,
part of the plan.
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, I don't know that we're going to be able to establish goal targets, because things like CapEx are a tough thing for us to be able to establish a goal. But I can tell you that we are working with the performance management team today to establish those metrics and those key performance indicators that we are going to measure on a regular basis, so that we can come back to council and provide that analysis to you, so you can see the efficacy of the programs yourself.
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, I'll jump in on that a little bit too. We are trying to manage the red tape. That was the #1 warning we got from our focus groups. And we understand there has to be balance. We have to have the data to know if this is working. We also need to make sure it's usable. So we talked about this a little bit, but I'll make this point again. We're doing something that has not been done in the rest of Arizona. We're taking programs from across the country, best practices, and we're putting them together and we're launching them all at once. This is pretty new. And so we understand that we're going to be learning and adapting and growing and changing, and we'll be taking feedback as we go and making adjustments. And I think as we go through this and we start to firm up what's working, what's not, we make changes, at that time, we may be able to look at goals. We may be able to set more of those things, but this first year, it may be worthwhile to look at it as a learning and adapting year.
Well, there's two ways of looking at that. You're asking for $3 million. I'd like to see some goals attached to that. I also understand that you're entering some uncharted waters here. But if somebody on one of my teams came and said, I'd like $3 million to do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to ask, what are your goals? So that's just feedback for what it's worth.
Councilmember Goforth. Mr. Heredia.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. Thank you for, listening to the council. We have said redevelopment is a priority, and you all have gone out and got creative and collected several ideas and put them into a toolkit, like you said, that has several programs that are done maybe on their own in other areas and put them all together. And I appreciate that because I think it shows that you heard council and we're going to be aggressive on this. At the same time, I do agree with Councilmember Adams. We have to be accountable for the money. Let's just keep that in mind too. But thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate you tackling this aggressively. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so thank you for this awesome presentation. I do have some questions. I just held them towards the end, so you guys could get through and I wouldn't interrupt anymore. In the beginning, you said you had a list of businesses that your economic development team spoke with for the redevelopment program. Could we maybe get some data points? So what list of businesses did you talk to? What categories were they in? You said you had feedback that was very strong support, and I think that's great. I love that. But I mean, what caliber? Like, was that 2 small businesses that gave you strong support? I'm thinking of this from a statistical perspective. You could say 50% of Americans support this, but if you've interviewed 2 people and one said they support it, that's 50% of Americans. So that would be very helpful for us. I think for maybe a few of us, not all of us. I speak for myself specifically. The businesses that you did speak with, I'd like to understand, and you might be able to answer this now, were they the businesses that need the redevelopment? Like they are the ones who are asking for some help? Or was it a culmination of those and then peripheral businesses who said, hey, my next door neighbor, their office space looks pretty terrible. I would love to see this program take effect so that I'm not suffering as a result of their shortcomings. I don't know if that helps.
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, Taylor.
I mean, he's cool too, so.
He'd have the same question maybe. The focus groups that we conducted were a variety of developers, property owners who have done redevelopment in the past, and then the small businesses were a mix of retailers, restaurants. Jeff, I know you have had the list, but I think there were 17 individuals, 17 or 18.
9 and 8. 9 in our small business, 8 in the developer.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. It gives you at least a good range of individuals.
Yes.
Okay, give me 2 seconds because you answered some of them, so I'm skipping a few as you went through your presentation. The reuse ready slide, I thought that was very helpful. One of the things that I was wondering about though is, I'm a limited, this is a real struggle for me because I know we need redevelopment and I'm a huge fan of it. And I have some areas in my district that I would love to just see blossom. But I'm also a limited government girl and I love the free market. So I'm in a really tenuous internal struggle right now because I want the free market to rule through this and change and we see good things happen. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen and sometimes it spans enormously long periods of time. So I was wondering, instead of having more of a negative consequence, would it from a psychological perspective, have you considered for the businesses to have more of a positive consequence, and instead of us giving them necessarily just a cash forward reimbursement, giving them better tax incentives and saying, hey, for X number of years, we're going to reduce the cost of doing business in Mesa if you can prove to us that you are willing to redevelop your area. Have you thought about any of that? Has that even come to the table?
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, I don't know whether or not you saw Jim fidgeting or not, but we're going to let Jim answer this question.
Yeah, Mayor and
I
Council.
didn't see you fidgeting.
Yeah, and it's sort of similar to like, we can't change the tax base on a particular business or in a particular area, either down or up. And so we do enter into some development agreements occasionally in which we reimburse people for public infrastructure from the sales tax that are generated on that particular site, but we don't reduce the sales tax. So
We don't give an incentive to like a specific business owner or anything like that?
no, you can't change this. You can't change the sales tax on one particular business or one area.
Okay. All right, well, that answers that question. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Okay, so then that's done. Do we have fees that we currently, I don't think we ever addressed this. Do we have fees that we charge right now for any type of blighted property? Are we doing that at all other than the code compliance fees when they're out of code? Is there anything additional that we have? So this would be a first. Okay, this would be the inception. Did you want to say something, Jeff?
No,
Okay.
The answer, yes. But,
Okay. And then for strategic acquisition and analysis, would this be, I wanted to make sure I understand, are you kind of saying that the city would almost operate as its own real estate investor, saying like, hey, we want to buy your blighted property, we'll fix it up, and then we'll flip it?
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, I would consider that to be the rarity. Our goal is to help the private property owners, the private market, understand the value of their property by providing them with some analysis of what the potential of that site is. There are going to be cases, such as One West Main, where we feel that the city's control of the site, complete control of the site, is sufficient enough that, or important enough that we want to go down that path. But that is going to be the very limited. And if you remember the budget slide, we put a expenditure cap, I believe, of $1 million on a strategic acquisition analysis. Knowing today's real estate market, that $1 million, if we were going into the actual acquisition, wouldn't get us very far. So really our intent on this is to be more about helping other people understand the value of their redevelopment.
I understand, yeah. I'm just thinking it would be helpful to have some guidelines so that we don't become a real estate acquisition firm, essentially, because that is not what the general public would want the city to turn into. Okay, I'm almost done, just going down. Placemaking, this was one of our big topics for our strategic planning session. This was actually something that came to mind, unfortunately, a little bit delayed. How many other cities has Mesa staff studied, or can you give us an idea of how many cities you've looked at where you've seen them really drill down and create placemaking that's been successful and fruitful in the long run, you know, where we've seen, 5 to 10 years down the road, this is still doing awesome?
Mayor, Council, actually is so much embedded in so many cities that we're talking about. And when we talk about placemaking, even with a strategic session, you could see we were looking at so many angles. So placemaking entails, are we talking about activity centers? And are we talking about activity centers that are walkable, that are kind of a place of attraction? Or are we talking about placemaking in the macro level where you enter a city and nobody tells you you are in a very well-planned city? So there are so many diverse ways. And if you look at, I'm sure you've traveled a lot, you go to well-planned cities, nobody has to tell you this is a well-planned city. And some of the things that they do is identification. You know, there is a strategic way of identifying that you are in Mesa that nobody really has to tell you. You know, when you enter a public space that is really well planned, people are looking, buildings are facing those public spaces, there is connectivity, there is sidewalks. So there are so many avenues that we're looking at placemaking that basically the city can specifically participate. And if you look at examples that you're talking about, there are so many. Even Mesa, when we talk about placemaking, there's been strategic actions that we as a city itself has taken. If you go to Riverview, the park, if you go to Elliott Road Tech Corridor, the reason why we have those identification, those are all strategies that the city basically in the past have undertaken, but we realize that there's been a shortfall. We need to be more aggressive in a way of improving our placemaking. And example, signage. If you go to other cities that you're talking about, you can clearly identify that you are in other cities when you are entering our city entryways. And I've sent this to the city manager so I can say, you see our small sign, Mesa, and it doesn't clearly identify a city. So when you talk about, if we've studied the example of cities, it's really a common practice for most well-planned cities that to be able to focus on placemaking strategies for various aspects and various areas in the city.
So not necessarily a categorized list of locations. You're looking at a broad sweep. And I'm looking at how that ties into this redevelopment plan.
Yeah,
you know, the
because-
cost, the overall aesthetic.
Yeah, because Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, because placemaking is broad.
Oh, it
And
is, yeah.
That's why when I started, I said this is one of the tools that the city can strategically I can't even say the word, actively participate directly. So it's just one tool of certain subcategories like entryway monumentation sign, working with private developers as to how they can really enhance their urban landscape and opportunities. But that's just a small, minute piece. Even the way buildings are designed and the orientation of buildings, it all really entails and really contribute to placemaking. So to tell you that we've looked at other examples, this is a basic function of city planning,
Yeah.
actually.
So then for redevelopment, when we're pitching to help a business, we're talking about almost potentially reorienting some of these businesses to better fit our future placemaking schematics?
That is a bit broader, but yes, but in this case specifically, when we're talking about this, we're talking about specific things that the city can actively make sure that, is done. Like, if you come in, we have a couple of large developments that are coming to Mesa. The city can partner with them to make sure their signage in a way identify Mesa. Because sometimes, even in our great areas, you enter and you don't even know this is Mesa, whilst you go to other cities, even though you have the companies or the development signage and all that, they are entryway monument, you can still see Mesa at the bottom. That itself identifying, even if you look at the way their landscaping is designed in a way, it all really creates a place that is inviting to the public and improve the public realm. So those are some of the things we're going to be doing. And even when we're doing CIP projects, we know when we're doing CIP, we have opportunity to look at places where we can either put an entryway monument sign or what can we incorporate. Sometimes it could be just a mural. It could be just an artwork when we're doing a CIP project to really just enhance that part. One example that I know downtown, Jeff has worked with some of the places in downtown is even if you look at our transformers. I know in the past years we were, instead of having those, boring transformers, we started wrapping them with City of Mesa logo and all that. And as much as it may not be so visible, there is a sense of attraction when you see them. And if it's done well, incorporated into our urban landscape, you will start to see those improvements and ways of attracting and making the place attractive to people.
Okay, these are just, I'm thinking of the nuanced details of how this ties into redevelopment, potential requirements, or what we would look at suggesting for businesses, because it's not just a basic, hey, we'll help you do better on your landscaping. That means we have some forward ideas that we would be trying to slide across the table as recommendations.
And Mayor,
And I want to clarify that for the public who are listening right now.
And Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, and another thing to note, and Jeff touched on it when he was on the public benefit slide, placemaking is also an opportunity. If we are providing an incentive through one of the other RDA tools, say the demolition program, placemaking can be If we're negotiating a benefit that's, beyond that $75,000 or placemaking can be a negotiated benefit that is an obligation of the private development to provide to the city. We've had this in multiple projects actually in downtown. If you look at the Grove on Main, not the Grove on Main, Melody on Main project, and you look at the surrounding streets, all those surrounding streets now have wider sidewalks, greater landscaping, landscape islands in the street, none of which existed prior to that development, but was a negotiated public benefit in order to receive the incentive they received from the city. There's other cases where we've required the MAD murals to the building as a benefit to help in creating place. So not only are we looking at this as opportunities where the city is installing placemaking interventions such as entry monumentation, this is part of a broader initiative and that we are considering placemaking as part of all of our redevelopment program.
Yeah, there's a lot of details to just the word placemaking. Okay. So I don't have any other questions. I would like to learn a little bit more about some of the other funding opportunities that you discussed outside of just the EDA and the CDFIs, particularly like grants, the bank grants, public infrastructure, not necessarily just relying on tax dollar funding. Again, I love this idea. I think I need a little more time to think about the pitch to the public and saying, hi, we would like $3 million to do a wonderful thing for you, but I need to have more approval just from at least my district. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Heredia, Ms. Goforth, any further thoughts, questions?
No, thank you.
Okay.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, Ms. Duff, Mr. Adams. Okay. I'll just summarize some thoughts that I had. Number one was, I think we have a fiduciary responsibility to understand vacancy in our city and what may impact our, just everything that we do, what business-wise, neighborhood-wise, and I appreciate, coming up with this program. As a former public safety guy, I remember responding to calls when we cannot find who's the building owner. And regardless, I think it's important that we know through this registry who the building owners are. Second, or third, I thought that we could also look at Phoenix's success rate, Councilmember Adams, for data. Well, I think you can have some type of baseline through what Phoenix has been doing previously or currently, and then help kind of guide us into what we're doing today. I believe, there's some buildings that are probably not all leasable. They're not all marketable. What do we do with those? What does the property owner do with a building that's not really scale or however functionality, that we have to deal with that? I'm kind of trying to figure out who's the lead department. There's four of you here, and who's going to take the lead, or unless it's commingled with everybody. And then, I'm looking at the staffing for the departments. Who's running this? What department? Do you have enough staff to run it? Second of all, I'm looking at the job creation here. If we're successful, just bringing small business, medium businesses to some of our RDAs that are necessary, and then obviously that increases our sales tax revenue. So I think there's some more work we can do, and I applaud everybody for doing this, and because this is one of the strategic goals that we have as a council. We need to reinvest, as I've said, in ourselves and help our city grow foundationally, and it's going to take all of us combined. So I'm very happy with that. Mr. City Manager, did you?
Yeah, Mayor, Council, thank you. Thanks for your feedback too. We're standing up something new, right? And so there should be these good questions, and staff's taking that to heart, and so we'll be able to tailor some of these things moving forward based on those suggestions, and then accountability that Councilmember Adams and many of you have spoken about will of course be part of that. That's why I've really wanted to characterize this. I think it's important to characterize this as a pilot program too. What I've heard from council is that they want to see action in this area. They want to see some of our blighted portions of our community, vacant properties, other things turned around for the betterment of our residents, for our neighborhoods. So this is the city intentionally getting engaged in a process to try to better the community. But this is new for us. These are new programs. We're going to learn a lot through this process, and we're going to report back. We're going to track. We're going to report back. We're going to learn. I'm sure we're going to shift, based on responses that we get from partnerships along the way. So that's going to be really important too. Mayor, to your question, that's why we think we have the capacity to administer this right now. If it's wildly successful, then we may have to talk about staffing in the future. But as part of a pilot, I think we have the capacity that we can see what the response is and see how we can manage this, and then we can make decisions down the road if council deems this to be worth the investment that the city's making in this. But I also just want to say too, this isn't the end-all be-all of the things that you all have challenged us to do. We're looking at the development review process right now. How do we streamline it? How do we make it more business-friendly? How do we allow small businesses and large businesses to get through our process quicker, get to market quicker? All of those things that you've heard. So redevelopment's part of it. The development process is part of it. The regulatory environment is part of it. Those are all things that we hear you, and they all function together in a large ecosystem. It's not one magic bullet that's going to, solve this. It's going to be all of the above that help change some of the trajectory of the developments in the community that we'd like to see maybe in a better light moving forward.
I said no, but I would like to add on when it's appropriate.
Sure, let me, so did I miss where the 3 million was coming from?
So, Mayor, we'll bring that back as part of the budget. We've had some funds that were earmarked in the general fund for a different purpose that we might be able to use other funding to go for that would give us some of the flexibility to pay for this pilot program. So that's something we'll bring back as part of the budget.
Okay, Ms. Duff.
I was thinking about back on how we got on this road. Of course, we all share the common goal of redevelopment in our city. But in my experience, just in my district, especially around downtown, I could write a book of the number of projects of small businesses who attempt to fill a space, enter a space, do their tenant improvements, something happens, and there are detrimental things that happen that are just like, oh my gosh, how do I suddenly come up with $50,000 for that? It is on the brink of sometimes taking a business who has spent a long time trying to get open, extending that 6 months, possibly they're going out of business, or they're just in it and then a discovery and maybe they just collapse. There's been urgent, sad stories of a number of small businesses trying to do the simplest thing of they were just got an occupancy permit and the inspector came in and noticed something, and now they have to rebuild something because it wasn't up to code or it wasn't on some plan, or there are things again and again, just adding on a patio sometimes. Well, there's all kinds of things again and again and again that stop small businesses from taking the next step to really be successful. And small businesses are the culture and the social fabric of our city. No one goes, oh, I've got to go to Chandler because they have a cheesecake factory. No one does it, but you will go to another city because you hear about these great little individual businesses doing great things. But I tell you, as a small business trying to make it in your own space, it's a huge challenge. And there aren't banks who give you money for this. If you need some money, they'll say, how can you secure it? Well, if I had $100,000, I wouldn't be asking for $100,000. Well, you have to secure it. This is really stopping a lot of opportunity in especially the older part of our city and smaller spaces from being really rich and productive, is these spaces that are difficult to occupy, are difficult to transform, or they don't know, or maybe a property owner has a business, whatever is happening isn't working, and they have no idea what kind of options am I have? Maybe it could be a mixed use. Jeff has been in those conversations, so they take properties and find creative solutions and like, wow, I didn't realize I could do that. In the zoning, I could turn these so it's just a concierge services, all these little things to really turn our city around, because the current status, we're in a great economic development, real estate boom. The current status is there's a lot of properties out there need help, a lot. So in a recession, it's just going to get worse. I don't think the status quo is okay. I think we have to do something. I appreciate all the work that you have done to bring a multitude of these little things that I've heard and that you've discovered from across the nation and best practices and putting into one program. We don't have one silver bullet, but we are able to talk to you and find out what is that one thing. And the thing is, when you make that one thing successful, we've seen little strip malls, sometimes there's depressed and blighted for the longest time. And then one great little business comes in and it creates some traffic and it creates some activity. And the next time I go by, there's another, and pretty soon that whole strip mall is filled up with wonderful businesses and it looks good. And there's been investments in the facade from the property owner and it's working. It's working. So sometimes just that one little step, maybe it only helps that business, but it's exponential and the effect and what it can attract and other investment coming in. So I don't want us to really deny an opportunity that we so desperately need. And yes, we can create those performance metrics. Look at that ROI. How can we shape? This isn't working and that is, but as a leader, a city that is a size that can be a leader for so many other cities that are struggling, we can create a program that'll be remarkable by shaping it as we go forward. $3 million, yes, $3 million. The offset, what it could provide for our city in investment, sales tax, pride, reduction of blight, and the service hours for the properties that aren't working, is huge. So thank you.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Duff.
It's not a question, but I did want to say really quick. My husband works in the contracting field, so I asked him, hey, how much is it to demo? Approximately a 1,300 square foot building, like completely gut it down to the studs. He did say it's around $50,000. And if you were going to rebuild it really nicely, just but with basics, it would probably cost you around $250. So just so the public heard that.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Duff, while we were sitting here, Lance Webb, Texas, city projects recently are ranging from $13 to $20 a square foot for demolition. That, of course, the city project's a little bit higher, but yeah, that's a fair range.
I'm trying to check as we were talking.
Thank you.
Businesses or residents?
I just said a 1,300 square foot building, so I didn't specify. He just said if you want to rip it down to the studs, that's about what it would cost. He's gutting everything.
Did you ask if it had a drive-through?
No, I didn't. Would you like me to poke in on that?
We'll do that at a later date.
I'll come back to you all.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thank you.
your time here. Appreciate it. And we'll take a 10-minute recess. Well, welcome back, everyone. Item 1B is a presentation on funding recommendations for community development block grants, the Home Investment Partnership Program, Emergency Solution Grants, Human Services Programs, and Off the Streets Program, presented by Michelle and Justin and Candace. Time is yours.
Good morning, Mayor Freeman, Vice Mayor, and City Council members. Thank you for having us today. Today, we're going to hear a presentation and discuss the fiscal year 26-27 funding recommendations for the programs that you just mentioned, which include the Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership Program, Emergency Solutions Grant, and our Human Services programs, which also consist of the ABC program, which is a Better Community program. We are seeking direction on all of these funds. The city does administer several funding sources to support the community needs, which we'll go over in the presentation. We'll also outline how the federal and local funding sources are recommended to support critical housing, homelessness, and human service programs in the community. And we'll walk through the funding process, priorities, and the specific recommendations for consideration. The City of Mesa is a HUD, or Housing and Urban Development Entitlement Community. And what that means is we qualify under a formula grant of a population of 50,000 or more. And that formula is based on the census data, including population and poverty. We have participated in the Community Development Block Grant Program for approximately 47 years, and the Home Program for 38 years. So each year, the city will conduct an annual application process to seek applications from nonprofit agencies, as well as to allocate set-aside funds to core city programs. We begin in August with a notice of funding opportunity, which goes out to the community. And then we have our funding kickoff, which is our large meeting to present all of the funding sources to the nonprofit agencies and city departments as well, and cover all of the regulatory requirements and what type of applications we'll be accepting. Applications undergo an extensive internal review to confirm that each proposed activity for that particular funding source is eligible and meets all of the program guidelines and regulatory requirements. Staff develop follow-up questions to the agency's applications if there are any unclear areas or information or budget on the applications. And those applicants get an opportunity to respond, and those go into their application packet. So when we're developing our annual process, we do have to take into consideration very many elements, which include aligning with the City Council strategic priorities, as well as the 5-year consolidated plan that HUD requires us to develop. And we came to the council last year. That was the first year of our new 5-year consolidated plan that was approved. We also have a combined scoring process with both staff and the advisory board, which is our Housing and Community Development Advisory Board, who plays an extensive role in reviewing all of these applications and scoring as well. There are specific scoring rubrics that are used. Staff are looking at specific regulatory compliance, the agency's capacity to manage the funds, and also any past performance. That percentage of the score is 70%. And for the Housing and Community Development Advisory Board, they are looking at the need for the service, the impact in the community, and how that agency proposes to collaborate with other agencies. Okay, so we'll get into each individual funding source. For the Community Development Block Grant, this is one of the most flexible federal sources that we have. However, there are onerous reporting responsibilities and regulatory concerns. All activities must benefit low to moderate income residents, including any projects such as community facilities or parks that are located in a low mod census tract. And CDBG is designed to address a wide variety of community development needs. Typical uses for CDBG are housing rehabilitation programs, infrastructure, and public services to stabilize vulnerable populations. So on the screen, you do have some eligible activities, and I did want to go through individually. We have 2 categories in CDBG. We have our public service activities, which is limited to 15% of our annual allocation. So while it is a small amount, it does make a large impact in the community. These are more services or beds for persons experiencing homelessness, and really to provide stability. For our non-public service activities, that is 65% of the annual allocation, and that includes more of the bricks and mortar type projects. If you think of building things, housing rehab programs where we go into houses and provide improvements so that it doesn't affect the immediate livability of the home. Public facility improvements, such as a recreation center at a park that's located in a low mod area. And code enforcement and economic development are also eligible activities. So we've categorized the CDBG activities into lower risk category and higher risk activities. As I mentioned, there is a variety of activities you can do, but there's lots of considerations for each project. It's really important that we evaluate the risk of the activity, the project timeline, and any other what we call cross-cutting regulations. And those are in addition to the CDBG regulations, such as environmental reviews, which take a significant amount of time. Also, prevailing wages that are set by the Department of Labor. Those are just a few as examples. But I did just want to explain that we have 3 park projects that we have assisted through the non-public services. And just to give you an idea of the length of time for some of those projects, we funded the Reed Park improvement that we're so excited to say opened a couple months ago for all of the playground equipment. That was funded in our fiscal year 22-23 for $1.4 million, and it was completed in 2.5 years. So you can see how some of those projects do take quite a bit of time for complying with the regulations.
Michelle, was that 2 funding cycles or just 1 funding source?
Mayor Freeman, it was just 1 funding source, so it was for that fiscal year. We awarded that portion of money.
The 1.4 mil?
Yes, that's correct. Okay. So we'll get into some of the higher risk non-public service activities. Economic development is probably one of the more difficult activities to do. It must meet a national objective that either 51% of the jobs that are generated out of that business, once the assistance is done, go to low-income individuals. Some of the activities that are eligible are for-profit assistance, commercial or industrial improvements, and job training that's tied to business development. There is a public benefit standard, maximum of $50,000 investment per job created. So if we were investing $500,000 into a project, it would have to create 10 jobs.
Michelle, that's for the higher risk, is that right?
Councilmember Taylor, that is correct.
Okay, and then I think when we were talking, just so I have a clear understanding, if we wanted to apply our funds to some of those higher risk projects, you and Justin had mentioned there are some stipulations like for construction, Davis-Bacon, and then Section 3, which requires we employ people from lower income households to do the job. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
So if I wanted to allocate some of those funds to hire a code enforcement person, they would have to stay within that CDBG area, and then they would need to also be somebody who is employed from a lower income household but has the skill set to do that job?
Councilmember Taylor, not necessarily for code for that activity that you're talking about. It doesn't have to have a low-income person doing that. So if you have somebody hired to do code enforcement, they just have to be working in a low-mod area and be designated to that, and their time is tracked to that specific grant.
Got it. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Yes, that's a good. The one other big consideration when you are looking at different projects is with CDBG, HUD has a expenditure deadline and or ratio. So every May 2nd, we know that date very well, HUD will look at what's called our line of credit, how much money we have in there. And if we have more than 1.5 times that line of credit, they will put us on a workout plan, which basically we have to report to them every month how we intend to meet it for the following year. If it's not met the second year, you can get sanctions. And so it is really important that when we're looking at projects, we have a balance of those that are going to move quickly. For instance, with the Reed Park that we had That was quite a bit of money that sat there for a year and a half until we were able to get the environmental review done, all the plans, all the process that's involved. And so it's important to have other activities that are moving the money during that time. Okay, so now we'll get into the estimated funding that we have available for the fiscal year 26-27. Our anticipated allocation from HUD is $3.6 million. And I say anticipated because HUD has not released our actual allocations. It's anywhere between March and May that they will announce those. So we use the previous year's allocation to base our funding recommendations on. With CDBG, there's a 20% program administration as the staff are grant funded and are paid through the grant to manage these activities. And 65% of the grant must go to non-public services. And again, those are those bricks and mortar type activities. And then there is a maximum limit of 15% on public services. And you can, sometimes during the year, we'll get what's called program income, and that's repayment from any loans that somebody may have gone through a rehab program. And so that program income, a portion of that can be used for public services. So you'll see that although the 15% of public services is the $551,312, we did have a small portion of program income of $21,928, which brings our public services this year to $573,240. For the public services, we received 6 requests totaling $754,000. We do have a set aside for a core city program for city navigation services of $292,526. And so the remaining balance is recommended to fund 4 activities within the public services category. These recommended awards would be Family Promise, Child Crisis Arizona, CAS, which is shelters, and A New Leaf. These programs do provide direct services that help residents remain housed and connect to critical services. For the non-public services activity, we have a set aside for the Core City program, our emergency repair program, for $2.3 million. I did want to quickly give you some statistics on that program because it is very impactful. Sorry, it's back here. For the last fiscal year, the program expended $2.7 million. We assisted 165 homeowners in the community. So for this program, have to be a homeowner. We can do mobile homes through there as well. Out of the 165 projects, 102 of those were for AC repairs or replacements. And we do work very closely with Office of Homeless Solutions, Human Services for their heat relief with the portable air conditioners. 103 of those projects were mobile homes. And just to kind of paint a picture of the average income of participants, 57 households were at $40,000 or less, and that can be for a party of 1 or 5. We don't have those specific numbers, but under 40,000, and 108 of the households were under $30,000. Primarily, the folks that we serve through the program, 76% are elderly, 61% female head of household, and 48% disabled.
So
That's from the non-public services.
Correct,
On the
yes.
this is your set
emergency
aside?
rehab.
That was the set aside, the City of Mesa set aside emergency rehab program for the 2.3.
Okay. And that helps to keep those individuals in their homes? So that those
Absolutely.
properties don't become vacant and blighted, and it just helps to keep them in their homes so that they are more stable as a resident, yeah. Okay.
Mayor Freeman, Councilmember Taylor, that is correct. Some of the improvements that we do also are accessibility improvements, particularly on a lot of mobile homes. They'll have ramps that are very dilapidated, or if somebody needs a roll-in shower or grab bars, we can do that as well. But this program's designed specifically to address the immediate livability of the home. So in the summertime, air conditioners is pretty much all we do. If we get a monsoon, we get calls for roof repairs. So it's not upgrades to the home that are, fancy. It's just to help individuals stay in their home and preserve the housing stock.
Necessary. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll move on to our Home Investment Partnership Program. And this program is HUD's primary tool for creating and preserving affordable housing. And while their activities are limited to what we can do in this program, the impact is very significant. It does preserve existing housing stock as well as increase the availability of new, safe, affordable housing options. And activities include new construction of affordable housing, rehabilitation of rental housing. So if there's say like a duplex that's dilapidated, it can be acquired and renovated through home. And also rental and deposit assistance for folks trying to get into a rental unit that they may not have that first and second last month's rent. So for home, our estimated entitlement this year is just about 1.3 million, 1.29, with 10% program administration. And we are required under the regulation to hold 15% for what's called Community Housing Development Organization, or we refer to it as CHODO because it is a mouthful. They are nonprofits that develop, own, and own affordable housing, and their main mission is to provide affordable housing. And at least 1/3 of the organization's board members must be low income. There are not a whole lot of CHODOs in Mesa or within the Maricopa jurisdiction, and so it is challenging to use those dollars. So sometimes HUD will allow us to use them for regular home activities if we don't have those CHODOs.
Really quick question, going back just a little bit, you mentioned particularly the mobile homes that were under construction. Could we use these funds for pre-1975 improvements? Because I know those are pre-76 standards, so they have wiring issues, stud issues, a lot of stuff. Can we use that money there?
Yes, Mayor Freeman and Councilmember Summers, yes, we can. Again, we're going in and doing just minor repairs that are affecting the livability. So yes, we would be able to do that. On all homes that are 1978 or older, we do have to do environmental review process on.
Okay, because I believe the pre-76 standards for those mobile homes even have some copper wiring in there, and those are starting to catch fire.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And this is, and Mayor and Council, this is one of the very few funding sources that can be used on mobile homes.
Very good, thank you.
Next slide. So for our home program, we have a total of $3 million available. We have a $400 set aside for City of Mesa rental and utility deposit program, and recommending award to a New Leaf to their La Mesita Phase 4 construction. So they do have 3 completed phases, and this would complete the last one. This is going to be housing 54 units of senior and veteran housing. I do want to mention that a New Leaf will be applying for low-income housing tax credits because home is really gap funding. So with the small amount of funding of home, you can't really develop an affordable housing project. However, it becomes gap funding, and on LIHTC applications, if you have home dollars leveraged, you do get additional points. So the funding would be contingent on their LIHTC application.
So Michelle, to that point, I understand from Candace's briefing that they have applied twice and did not receive the LIHTC funding. That's correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
And so they're applying again for the 3rd time. So if that funding is not allowed, what are we going to do with this money?
And we have, Mayor, we have a few projects that are going through the LIHTC process for this application. We also have a COPA Health project that's going through, as well as the Commonwealth project that was brought to council this last Monday. So we've got a few projects in this round. As we go through and if they are unsuccessful in multiple years, then we will reassess and see. We want these funds to be productive. So after a few years, if they're not receiving the LIHTC awards, those are unproductive dollars, and we would convert these over to other projects. One of the things we are really having a lot of success with is when we partner with the developer up front and try to find out, that's more successful. We have $400,000 set aside for Habitat for Humanity, who is not going through the LIHTC project, and they will be developing 3 vacant parcels that the city owns in the Washington Escobedo neighborhood. And so that's not relying on LIHTC. And so we would look for more of those types of projects that we can assist with the home dollars, but are not reliant on the LIHTC.
Question, please. Why have the 2 previous applications that newly submitted failed? What were the reasons?
Mayor and Councilmember Adams, it's very, very highly competitive. And there's just a lot of projects and a few amount of dollars. And the dollars just run out for those.
And those are state dollars or?
Those are federal dollars that are administered by the state.
By the state.
So no reasons were given? I'm just curious because, well-established organization here in Mesa.
Yes, Mayor and Councilmember Adams, there are many very good projects on the list, and it's really just a matter of funding, not having enough funding for those. Each year there are sometimes of a priority. Last year was probably the most competitive process there was, or was that 2 years? Last year or 2 years before. What they were doing was actually allocating, they were pre-allocating, I don't think that's the correct term, but pre-allocating. Because there was such a high demand, they were actually allocating future federal funds through in 1 year, and that created kind of a gap. So they did it in 1 year, so the following year they had less funds they could allocate, so that kind of created that gap.
Understood. So the state administers this, is it a scoring process like we use similar here?
Yes. Yes, so Mayor and Councilmember Adams, it's a score of 185 points total that you can get through their scoring matrix. And if you recall on Monday when we were talking about the Commonwealth program, they have scored at 180 points. So that should make them a very good contender. Only 5 points that they're not eligible for because that was a historic reuse. And New Leaf is also a new build. So they would be competing against that same thing. So all of these, COPA is a new build, and it's a demo of an existing property and then a new build of new family units. So none of our projects have historical reuse in them, so we'll be missing those 5 points.
The COPA project you refer to is the one on Beverly?
On Beverly.
Okay, thank you.
And just to final up, if these monies are not allocated this year, I'd like to find other ways to use the money, have other opportunities for investment in our city.
Yes,
Okay.
and Mayor, with the creation of the Office of Urban Transformation, this team and that team have been working very closely together to how to best leverage all federal dollars with all various economic development projects.
Okay, good, thank you.
I have a quick question on that. So you said if they weren't allocated within this year, right? Okay, then we could reuse it, and that's allowable, like if we're good if they don't get allocated within the next fiscal year?
Yeah, so Mayor and Councilmember Taylor, unlike CDBG that has a spend down requirement,
right?
Home dollars, because they're made for brick and mortar and expected to be multi-year projects, it is much more lenient with the timing.
Okay.
So we can piece together these projects. If you see from the previous slide where it talked about our dollars, you're seeing our home allocation itself is only the 1.3 million, but we actually have total availability of 6.2 million.
Yes.
That's because that has accumulated over the years, and we piece those together and try to work into an economic development project.
Okay, I'm looking at the one you gave me, so it's very helpful. I'm making out my notes. Thank you.
Okay, so our Emergency Solutions Grant, this program supports homeless type activities in the community. It can be used for shelter operations or rapid rehousing, so getting folks from shelter to more stable, longer term housing, as well as homeless prevention with navigators in the community reaching out and giving resources. For this grant, this is one of our smallest grants. We received approximately $340,000, which we'll see on the next page here. We do have a 7.5% program administration, which brings the total funding available for $314,515. We do have a 60% max on shelter service operations. So within those activities, we make sure that any activity that is an operation of homeless facility is no more than 60% of our allocation.
I have a quick question about that. So I know that we use Phoenix Rescue Mission as our navigation service, and that particular location offers, my understanding is sheltering and non, there's quite a large organization. Is it possible to give our ESG funds to just further help that single organization because they're so large and they're doing so much for the entire valley?
Mayor and Councilmember Taylor, it goes through a competitive process. So with our HUD federal dollars, it does need to go through a competitive process.
Like they would have to apply for the funds?
Yes, so they could absolutely apply.
Okay.
Absolutely
So we
apply.
don't have the jurisdiction as council to say we want them to go here. They need to apply to that process and then we would look at them like everybody else.
Yes, and if you have information on that organization, we can add them to what's called our interested parties list, and they'll get all notifications on our funding process.
Got it. Well, I think we have lots of information on them. Okay, thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that for me.
Okay, so for our Emergency Solutions Grant, we are recommending award for 3 agencies. 2 of the agencies, Tempe Community Action and A New Leaf, would be shelter operation. For Save the Family, it is rapid rehousing. And so that brings our total to $314,515.
Those are the end of the HUD grant allocations, and so now I'm going to go over our Human Services and A Better Community. So you'll hear us talk about ABC funds. That means A Better Community. So ABC funds are funds that are donated by our residents to these particular purposes for crisis services, prevention and early intervention, transitional services, and long-term support is what we have on our website and all of our documents that go with this. And so those are donated funds. Human services funding is as a general fund allocation from the City Council that has been in place for a very long time, where there's an allocation over to the human services funding activities. The allocation for ABC funds is based on, again, donations received, so that can move from year to year, but it's been pretty steady around this. It's $104,500 that we're anticipating that would be available for next year. Our human services allocation is $547,163. There's this category, is combined when it comes to the application process, so it's still a competitive process. It goes through the same advisory board. It goes through the same scoring criteria. It's a little less rigid because these are not HUD funds, and therefore it allows the smaller nonprofits who don't have the administrative ability to do the HUD reporting are usually where we kind of ask them to look at this funding source rather than look at the HUD funding, because the HUD funding would be too onerous for them. As we go through and look at the ABC funds, we have allocated to, recommending allocation to 3 agencies: Valley of the Sun, YMCA, House of Refuge. I know there was a question at an earlier study session about House of Refuge. We have supported them over the years. It has been through the human services funding and not through the HUD funding, because they are a smaller organization. And then also Arizona Brain Food would round this out to take up the total of $104,500. For the human services funds, one of the things that the committee had asked us to look at was when we had those other conversations about the Off the Streets program and how could we find alternative funding to the funding that was has been in this is in the budget. The committee asked us to look at these particular funds. We identify that both CDBG funds and the human services funds are both eligible for the Off the Streets activity. The committee did give staff the direction to hold the Human Services funds for the Off the Street program while we look for other alternate funding. Staff is still continuing to do that. So we have not stopped looking for the other funding. Council has given us direction to please look for that. If there's any other funding that we can use for Off the Streets, we are in the middle of that process. So we have not stopped that process. But in the meantime, this process was taking place. And so committee did give us direction that they would like to hold the Off the Street, this particular funding for Off the Streets while we finish the other one. Then we could still come back and reallocate those. What we did include here as well, though, is we included another slide of the nonprofits. So again, this was a competitive. This is probably our highest area where the nonprofits apply because again, it is limited reporting for them. So it's an easier, lower barrier to access. This one does have a maximum award. And I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, things on CDBG and HUD funding, we have minimum awards of $25,000 because of the reporting requirements. In this particular category, we have a maximum award of $50,000 because we do want it to be spread over multiple nonprofits if we continue to move in that direction. These would be the nonprofits that scored the highest. That would add up to that same $547,000.
Candace, I have a question on the previous slide 20, Off the Streets program. 547,000, that goes to which agency to fund which? Windermere?
This is for the Off the Streets program, regardless of whether it's at Windermere or Sun Air. It's for the Off the Streets program.
So it's going to Windermere right now?
It would be if this is not currently allocated.
But prior it has been allocated?
It has not. So Mayor, this is a new allocation. So this year at Windermere, we have a combination of ARPA and general fund. The budget for next year was supposed to be $2.5 million of general fund. Council gave us direction to look for alternate funding. In that alternate funding, we identified 1.7 million of home ARP dollars, which is it's not part of these buckets. And the funds we were looking for was the $800,000 gap.
So Mayor and Council, I think as we had the discussion about the future of the Off the Streets program, and we're continuing to work through some different options about what that could look like. Knowing the importance, though, we don't need to identify these funds for Off the Streets. We'll come back with other alternatives that can help us make a decision about how we'd like to see that program evolve in the future. And knowing just how important these funds are to some of these community-based nonprofits and others, this is important to an Oakwood or to Arizona Brain Food, all these organizations that have benefited from these donations in the future. From these contributions in the future, I think would be short-sold when there's other options that we can look to for the Off the Streets program. So, Council, I would recommend focusing more on the alternative proposal, slide 21 that's in here, and focusing your effort in that regard versus the Off the Streets program. And again, that's something we'll come back to you in the near future with some options about how to move forward with that.
Vice Mayor, you had a comment?
Yeah, a moment ago, Candace, you mentioned that Human Services funds is where House of Refuge usually finds some of the funding, but this alternative doesn't have House of Refuge.
Mayor and my Vice Mayor Summers, that's because they scored really high, and so they were funded in the ABC category first.
They're back in the ABC.
And so we allocated the ABC categories first, knowing that there is no alternate to that because of the way that those funds were donated by our residents.
Yeah, that's where I faded out. Okay, good, thank you.
Can we give a House of Refuge ABC funds and Human Services funds? Is that something that we can?
Mayor and
Just curious.
Councilmember Taylor, this is what they applied for, and we do have a maximum of
Okay.
$50,000 in this category.
Out of both of those, like they just get 50?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I guess just to follow up, funding for Windermere, you said ARPA monies. How many dollars in ARPA and general fund dollars are we using to fund currently Windermere?
I would need to look at that for this year. For next year's budget, we do not have any ARPA dollars budgeted for next year.
Yeah, because they expire.
Mayor, they expire in December of 26, but we actually, we will have a little bit that we will be carrying over because we do have savings from this year, so
Okay.
we'll carry over for next year. So at this point, I would just say, starting next year, we do not have any ARPA funds for that program.
Right. General fund dollars, what are we appropriating for that?
Mayor, that's what we are in discussion right now because council gave us direction to look for alternate funding, and we're in the middle of that right now. We'll be coming back to council with those
But
options.
for last year, we funded it with some general fund dollars.
We did. So council, included in this year's budget was $800,000
That's what I was
in the
asking.
gap funding, correct. I'm sorry, $900,000 this year.
900, okay. All right, thank you. Carry on.
Question, please.
Yes.
Looking at slide 21, the 547, 163 with the various agencies, and this is probably because I can't follow two tracks of thought at the same time, and you may have covered this, but these numbers here that we see, are these amounts that these agencies have applied for and they made the cut in the scoring? Is that where these numbers came from?
So yeah, so Mayor and Councilmember Adams, we do have an additional attachment in Legistar for you that shows their request for and their award. But yes,
Okay.
if it's $50,000, that's the maximum they could apply for.
Okay.
If it's lower than that, that is probably what they actually requested. Until you get toward the bottom. So if you go down to
Okay.
Big Brothers and Big Sisters, that would be the dollar amount that was remaining.
Understood. Okay.
If there, and Mayor and Councilmember Adams, if there is a change in what they requested versus what they received, sometimes that has to do with the fact that they had funds this year that they didn't fully expend.
I see.
So the staff will still look to see, do they have the capacity to spend the funds that they requested?
Understood. Thank you.
So with that, with the staff recommendation then to go with Human Services funds to the nonprofit alternate, unless we hear otherwise, that's what we would move forward with. And then we can talk about the schedule. But are there any questions on anything that we have presented up to this point?
Mr. Heredia, you're out there somewhere.
He passed out. From all the excitement.
No, I texted him. He said he was back on.
It's finding the mute button, to turn it off. That's tough.
I was just curious to know, when we are making decisions on the HUD funds, just gonna read my own note, how much, when we set these up, is it set in stone, or are we locked in if we make a decision today and we just can't make any future decisions on those funds for the next year? So once we decide what we want to do, it's done for a year. Can we pivot at all? Do we have any flexibility? Because I remember you saying, we need to know what to do with the HUD funds. So I just want to know how set in stone are we when we make that decision?
So Mayor and Councilmember Taylor, when we say, I did say, yes, we need direction today on HUD funds.
I listen.
And the reason why we need direction is because there is a specific timeline that we need to follow. And so we do need to go out, once we have direction from council today on the HUD funds, we need to do a 30-day public notice. And then we actually come back with the resolution. So the resolution itself would then do those HUD funds. That's what we would send up to HUD and say, that's what we're doing. Now, can we change once we go up to HUD? Yes, we can. Now, for the nonprofits, the pass-through to nonprofits, we will start working on those contracts, and the contracts would be in effect on July 1st. So once we enter into those contracts, that's what the resolution does when we come back in May. It would be giving the city manager approval to enter into contracts with these nonprofits.
That we're passing the money on
That we're
through.
passing the money through.
Okay.
Now, for any project or program that is city,
Yes.
that's not a contract. So that is something that if we decide to pivot and do something different, again, we have to then notify HUD that we're going to do something different. But that is something that we can do mid-year.
And that's those tangible versus those intangibles that we talked about. And to keep, I'm gonna try and do this right. To make sure that this city doesn't get dinged because we don't want to hold funds back for too long. We discussed it being wise that while we want to use some of those funds for some city, those non-public service funds for some projects, it is kind of best to have some of them kind of moving through as those public service project funds, so that we're not just holding everything back for like one non-public service project that takes a long time, and then HUD says, hey, you're not using your money, so we're gonna start dinging you on that. Is that right? Did I do that right?
Yeah, so Mayor and Councilmember Taylor, good job. That was a lot of information that we gave you the other day. Yes, so when it comes to the CDBG non-public funds, that is the one that we do have to watch, as Michelle talked about, that timing. It is okay to have slow-moving projects if you have enough fast-moving projects that we're able to hit our spend-down numbers. And so it's really a balance right now.
Okay.
We have two projects. We opened up Reed Park. We have two parks projects that are currently going through that process today. They are going out to bid, is my understanding, and will be on your next council agenda. Will be those projects. So we do have two projects that are slowly moving some of the money across, which is why our rehabilitation program has really benefited us.
Yeah.
Because we can get that money out the door faster, and that's giving us our balance.
Got it.
Now, once we get the parks projects through, I don't believe we have any other slow-moving projects.
Got it.
So now we can start to
Opens up the
entertain
window.
another slow-moving project and still use the rehabilitation to kind of fill the gap.
Yes, and that would be the non-public services.
Non-public services, the about 2.3 million.
Very helpful, thank you. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Adams?
Yes, thank you. So there's a scoring process. And I'm sure it's changed since the time I've participated in that, but I remember the general gist of how it works. Give me a high-level overview once more, please, of how does that work? What things are considered? Where is weight given? Where is greater than other factors? Just a 50,000-foot view, and then I may have a follow-up question.
Okay, well, Mayor and Councilmember Adams, I'm going to let Michelle and Justin handle this. There are rubrics for both teams.
Okay.
Mayor Kimball, Councilmember Adams. There are very specific, oops, apologize. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
So the agencies have to submit their application first. After reviewing the application, staff reviews for HDAB, questions that they would have during their presentation process. So regulatory concerns, concerns related to their scope of work, related to their beneficiaries, related to their budget. If the agencies do not respond to that timely, there is a 5-point reduction in their overall scoring. Additionally, agencies then have a presentation. It's 2 full days of presentations for the local and HUD funding sources. If the agency did not respond to the questions and not present, they are disqualified from the process. To touch on the scoring and what it specifically covers, 70% is associated with the staff scoring. That is really demonstrated capacity. Did the agency in the preceding fiscal year expend all of their allocation? In their scope of work, did they fully meet the unduplicated persons or households to be assisted? And then transitioning more to the HDAB scoring component, they're scoring the presentation, they are scoring the partnership. There is also an element of review of their budget and scope of work as well. So did that answer all your questions, sir?
Yes, thank you. It leads me to a follow-up question. So as you look at the organization, you're evaluating their history, their performance, the scope of their work and their effectiveness. What about the financial capacity of the organization? If you have one that's asset-rich, a lot of money in the bank, versus one that may be a little more financially challenged, yet both are capable and have proven that they've done good work, is that considered as part of the scoring? Does the organization that has huge assets, perhaps is it considered to have less need than one that does good work and is maybe a little more challenged? How does that work?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, in the agency's scope of work, and I want to differentiate 2 different things. For home, that is a substantial factor. For the financial feasibility, we do a full underwriting and analysis of their liabilities, of their anticipated rent roll, and all of that is factored and taken into consideration, and that is regulatory. For CDBG, I would transition to a little bit of a different perspective. So we have a column that identifies what they're requesting for federal or local funding, and then we have a column that identifies their support funds that they're bringing to the table. So in short, yes, that is factored and taken into consideration. When there's questions, when there's concerns related to this, this is addressed in the questions that the agencies have to respond to. I would also say that we have a finance team that is involved in the evaluation and scoring of this rubric as well. And so other factors taken into consideration is prior audits. There could be a money factor concern related to those audits and the managed responses. So yes is the overall question to that, albeit a little bit different to the magnitude for various funding sources, but it is very thoroughly evaluated.
Okay, thank you. Glad to hear it. The concern that I would have is I wouldn't want the process to be a bar to an otherwise well-qualified organization that maybe just didn't have the financial resources that another would. So, and it sounds to me like you take that into consideration. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And just real quick, Mayor and Councilmember Adams, they are a lot more rigid on their review of the ones who are asking for HUD funds. Because we want to we want everybody to be successful, and we don't want an organization to actually take on HUD funds and not really understand the ramifications of that and what they're going to need to do for admin and reporting and so forth. So they're actually more highly vetted for those HUD funds to make sure that they'll be successful.
Okay, glad to hear it. Where I'm really coming from is I just want to make sure that we're really evaluating need versus nice to have.
And that's what, and Mayor and Councilmember Adams, that's why the Human Services Funds was created way back when. And with that council allocation that was the intent then as well, is that we have nonprofits like House of Refuge who HUD funding may be difficult for them to administer, but they're a very great program and we want to support them. And so that was really the start of the allocation to the Human Services Funds.
Ms. Taylor,
Sorry.
Go, Mr. Butler, you want to?
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to say to speak to an issue that we've heard from several council members both this morning and over the last few months. As was noted at the start of this presentation, this funding cycle started back in August of last year, where the notice was put out, kind of our traditional process that we go through each year on the distribution of these funds. Subsequent to that, I know council's expressed interest in seeing utilizing these CDBG funds or the HUD funds in general. What are those ways to maximize those funds along with some of the city council priorities, and what opportunities are there? And that was alluded to about the risk analysis that would need to be performed based on HUD criteria for those activities. But we hear you, and I think that there's an opportunity before we enter into the next cycle that we can explore some of those opportunities, come back to you with options and risk assessments that are attached to those different options. So then council could go into the next funding cycle eyes wide open, and we can also set expectations about the amount of funds then that might be available to external entities through that process too, if there was some consensus amongst the council about utilizing funds in a different way on some of those council priorities. So that's something that we hear you. I just want you to know that, and so we can bring options back. But it would definitely be challenging to maybe change at this stage of the game, since we're really at the finish line of this year's process. But that is something that we can certainly look at moving forward.
Well, you just primed me up.
Yeah.
City manager.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for a few years, and there's a huge learning curve with everything and with all the regulations and risks involved. I get it. But at the end of the day, one of my focuses now as mayor is to elevate Mesa to the best potential. And when we went through your CDBG on slide 6, you talked about the non-public service activities. But I think that we have city departments that could use these funds, and we've kind of discussed that briefly. And how do you prime your departments, our city departments, to be able to be eligible to receive these funds and do the risk analysis and put everything into play? That's what I want to do. I want to work extremely hard on getting these funds to help build our small businesses, our low to mod census tracts, redevelopment, economic development. And so I saw that, then I saw on slide 7, the low risks. Some of this, what I just said, are low risks. And I wish we'd been doing this sooner, or at least allocating a portion of these monies towards these programs to see how we're successful, these pilot programs, so that we can put some more monies into it. Then the higher risk ones, I see them as well. But right now, I think that we need to really focus on our lower risk modems for our non-public services. With that said, I worked really hard. I'm going to read some notes that I prepared. But I'd just like to step back and look at how these current federal funding recommendations align with City Council stated priorities, which city managers talked about, particularly around revitalization, code compliance, blight reduction, neighborhood safety. I want to see visible change in our neighborhoods, cleaner, safer, more stable communities. And we need to ensure our funding strategy reflects that. Right now, I think there's an opportunity to align that. By this, I'd like to offer in the future policy changes for council as we look at funding additional code officers, redevelopment personnel for downtown transformation team, economic development, and how we can leverage monies to work for the City of Mesa programs versus social programs. That seems to be the easiest reach out each year to allocate funds for. We're heavily investing in people-based services, but investing in place-based improvements, which improvements people see every day in our community. Our community wants safer, more stable neighborhoods, and our funding strategy should reflect both people and places. Over the years, we've given monies towards facade removal based on low, medium census tracts. We can get monies out to underperforming shopping centers in these tracts. I'm not going to get a lot in the weeds because I read into it. But I think we need to stable areas in our city, and I would like to challenge council members to look into their respective districts and see where these monies can be used. We learned about parks, the parks rehab. That's awesome because a lot of people can go there. These dollars are available, these federal dollars, and they can be used. And I'd like to see staff come back with options recommending using every dollar we can to strengthen our neighborhoods and our businesses. And, city management might have to look at, core services that we have, and the job of our city manager is how he can make it all work with all your department heads. So, I understand this is complex, and but I think that it's time to, in my opinion, to move forward in some other different areas. And so that's what you get the opportunity to do here. All right. So with that, I just let out with that. But I like clarity because that's why I ask questions, what buckets fund what? I know we're talking about this thing, but when we talk about Office of Homeless Solutions, there's different buckets that fund different programs. We need to know where those dollars come from. And sometimes I feel like there's a lack of transparency, and I have to dig for those numbers, and I don't like that. So with that said, I hope I fired somebody up. But,
you did. I'm excited.
No, but
I love this idea of using some of those funds for our districts, for sure. I think I expressed that in our meeting. But one thing came up that I thought we could get some public clarification on, because a couple people actually asked me about this when I was sharing what we were learning. And that is, you mentioned that our ABC funds that are donated by the general public through our utility bills, they help some of those crisis. I think we have them on here. Valley of the Sun, House of Refuge, Arizona Brain Food. I know that some individuals were under the impression that those funds offset the cost to our residents who can't necessarily afford their utilities. Do you mind just, again, stating for the record, we have this program to help with utilities, and ABC goes to the 3 that are here on this, just so the people can hear it.
So thank you. Mayor and Councilmember Taylor, the ABC funds are a broader category. They are not while we did a lot of marketing through the utility bills, it's not a utility offset for that program. We do have a separate utility assistance program that we do fund. We fund it through the actual revenues of our utilities. And Mesa Can administers that program for us. So we do have a separate utility assistance program. We also have a senior low-income program, so a discount program for utilities as well. So we have other utility programs. ABC funds are a larger, more, like you said, that crisis response, intervention, support services, all the things that our human services funds oversee at the same time. They're really all the same. We separated them here for you because ABC funds, really we can't divert to something else because they were collected with those in mind, with that transparency. The other human services funds are a council direction. And so that's why we separated them for you here.
Perfect. Okay. So because we told
Otherwise,
the public.
it'd be anything on that
Yeah.
list. These happen to be the 3 that scored the highest.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So we have 2 programs that are for seniors who need some help, and we have the Mesa Can to help offset the cost of utilities. And then the ABC funds, because they're publicly generated, and we already said these are the crisis response groups that money's going to, we can't just divert them over to helping cover other people's utilities, at least not right now.
Right, and Mayor and Councilmember Taylor, because we put these through, and we can change it in the future, but we have put these through the competitive process since we have had the ABC funds, and so that's our normal competitive through the advisory board. So our advisory board is telling us what the most important programs are that they would like to fund. So they're the ones who are really allocating
Driving it.
those donation dollars.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Ms. Duff.
Yeah, you fired me up a little bit. You knew that was going to happen.
I did.
So here we go. When it comes to CDGB dollars, and I think that's what we're targeting with your remarks in looking at economic development. Of course, Candace mentioned the difficulties in utilizing those funds for economic development purposes. It's very difficult, and it's one of the reasons we pulled away from that some time ago. So I really think in shifting from human services from human form to the built form isn't really achieving anything. I think like the emergency rehab program that we have under CDGB, that is stabilizing our neighborhoods. These are neighbors who don't have a means to keep things going, to stay in their home. And so we are stabilizing our neighborhoods by stabilizing the people in them. We've got to recognize that our human service needs are beyond the capacity of nonprofits, churches, and even what we have. And in 52% of our residents their housing costs are 50% or greater. Transportation is about 30% of their income. Childcare is about 30%, and we haven't even got to healthcare and food and these other things. So the human condition is very, very dire in these current economic conditions. If we pull away from that, it destabilizes our neighborhoods, destabilizes people not being unsheltered, and then not being able to have the assistance to keep things going. I appreciate that we want to do things in economic development, and I think we can do that through our redevelopment program that we just reviewed. But pulling it away from human services, from the human condition, I don't think gets our city with what we want to be, who we are as Mesa. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, did you have something? I saw a finger raise.
Well, you fired me up. I just don't look like it. Just a couple of quick comments. I think that in the overall, Mayor, I concur with your comments and the direction you're suggesting. There are, I think we can all identify problems and issues, but how we get to the solution is sometimes where we differ. When I ran for this office, I did so on the basis of, among other things, of fiscal responsibility and promising to protect the public purse. And I think, again, we can all agree that we have social issues, as were just mentioned. It's how we pay for them and how we address them. And I think it's clear to me that a good portion of our residents don't feel that the public purse is appropriate for that, at least not in the entirety. The problem exists and it needs to be addressed, and I think that if we move forward by continuing to identify non-publicly funded solutions, and there are many, and explore how can we work with these organizations to take some of the burden away from the taxpayer while still addressing the problem. It's not easy to do, but I think that is, at least for myself, I like to keep my word, and that's what I told people I would do if I was elected, and here I am. So I support generally where the mayor wants to go with this. There are a number of things that I think we can do to support our neighborhoods. I'll just say this. I have some reservation and hesitation about further empowering code enforcement until I've had the opportunity to explore certain issues of fairness and equal enforcement, and we're working on that. We have a great dialogue going on that, but yes, I think in the overall, this is a good direction for us to pursue. I am interested in continuing to look at options and solutions that don't first ask the taxpayer to get out their billfold. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
You fired me up.
Or you're used to putting out fires?
It was fun, too. I think it's a great discussion, and these discussions have to happen every year, because if we get static in how we address problems, then we're going to find ineffective solutions. Something that might have worked last year may not work a few years from now. So with that in mind, I know that some of what was discussed today is going to take a runway and to really get our head around. I'm going to suggest that we, because the timeline is short on this, that we take the alternative funding from Human Services Fund to the next step for March 30th for the 30-day public comment. Is that correct? So depending on council's direction.
If we didn't, what is the other option?
Mayor and Councilmember Taylor, the HUD funding is the funding that we really need the direction on, because we
hang
have
up
to
the
hit the HUD timelines, right? So to actually get it up, even if in the middle of the year next year we decide to change our minds, we still had to have followed this process regardless. So that's what we need to do. The ABC and the Human Services funding are not HUD required, so that's City of Mesa, so we don't have a timeline on those.
Got it.
I'm fine with the alternate funding source myself.
We're going to hang up our timeline otherwise.
All right, so thank you. So Mayor and Council, so based on that direction, thank you for that. We will go out to the 30-day comment period or public notice period, and we'll come back on May 4th. May 4th at your council meeting.
And then Mayor and Council will come back to you before the next funding cycle opens with further discussion and options about how we would like to treat next year's funding cycle based on the discussion this morning about potential options that Council would like to pursue.
Very good. Thank you. Been an eventful morning. Gosh, Mr. City Manager, you put together great agendas on Thursday mornings after a late night last night for most of us.
Councilmember Heredia always reminds me of how action-packed these meetings are, so I'm sure he's thrilled.
Okay. We're going to excuse Ms. Duff. We're just going to roll into next. Actually, we have a
Board of Committee.
Yeah. I just need to acknowledge the receipt of board minutes. Is that okay? All right, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. All in favor say aye. 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 Okay, motion passes. Next is current events and conferences attended. Council members, do you wish to share anything?
You know, I'll just stay humble.
Nothing here.
All right. Mr. Butler, you want to share future meetings?
Well, you've had so much fun today, you can't wait to come back next Thursday for study session at 7:30 a.m. Just of note, this weekend, a couple of community events. First is this Saturday here at City Plaza out at the park is the Cyclo Mesa event from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So it's a free, family-friendly bike festival presented by the Mesa Moves organization. So. And then we have our community baby shower from Saturday, also on Saturday, the 28th from 10 to noon at Eagles Park. This is a community resource fair supporting expecting moms and families in Mesa, presented by the Mesa Family Resource Center. So thanks for all the organizers and donors for putting that event together.
There's a Celebrate Mesa coming up. When is that?
It is, and that is
April 11th.
April 11th, yes. We just crowdsourced that. Yeah, April 11th is that, okay. Yes, at Pioneer Park, and we'll talk about that. We'll keep giving those reminders, but that is a free event that we'd love Mesa residents to come out and get to have the fun and learn more about city services while they're at it.
Great. It's a nice event. Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we have quorum. We can do that. Thank you, Mr. Redia. All right, we're done.